Hello. Hey, this is Warren Redlick. I want to thank you all for watching. We're going to have a special, please let me know if you can't hear me, by the way, but we're going to have a special live stream tonight. Ricky Roy from the YouTube channel Live Tuba Da Vinci has agreed to debate me about Lucid Motors. For people who know, I am a critic of Lucid Motors. I have been critical of them since September. There was a reveal video that they did in September talking about what their new vehicle is going to be, the Lucid Air. And I was very excited about Lucid before this reveal. And then after the reveal, I was just greatly disappointed. I thought it was a lot of fluff. I don't believe their claims. And since then, I've made a few more videos that are critical of Lucid, and Ricky has taken issue with that. Ricky believes in Lucid Motors. So we are going to talk about it. Ricky has the channel Tuba Da Vinci. He's a software engineer. Ricky, for starters, why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself and your channel?
Yeah, thank you so much, Warren, for having me on. I've been looking forward to this for all week, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So thank you to all you guys who've joined in. We can see your chats and stuff, and we'll try to engage with you near the end. But yes, I'm Ricky with Tuba Da Vinci. I have a YouTube channel where I talk about kind of the future of technology, energy, transportation. We cover a lot about Tesla. I think Warren and I have that in common. We're both big Tesla fans. And I watched, Warren, I found some of your videos talking about Lucid, and I watched some of them. And I think, first of all, like, most of your critiques, I think, are solid. I think the conclusions I'm drawing are largely different. But this should be fun. Thank you for Kevin and King for letting us know your audio is good. So, yeah, that's kind of our channel. We'll put links in the description after the video is over to check us out. But hopefully, and if you're new to Warren's channel as well, please make sure to subscribe to his channel. He's got some really nice content around this stuff. Let's get started.
Yeah, but anyway, is there anybody? I want to thank the Vasa Law Firm in Sweden and all my Patreon supporters for helping this channel grow. Ricky, is there anybody that you want to thank? Or do you have a Patreon account? Anything like that you want to mention?
Yeah, I see some of our viewers here. Yes, we have a Patreon as well, and I see a lot of our viewers are on the call. So thank you guys all for your support. Thank you, Warren, for hosting. This is going to be fun, and hopefully we can do this maybe on a recurring schedule at some point as things emerge.
Yes, I would love that. So just for starters, like I said, in September they had a reveal for Lucid Motors, and I was disappointed. I was excited about Lucid. I thought it's great. There's going to be another EV maker, and then I just felt like this fell flat. Some of my criticisms are I think their claims for what they're going to deliver in the Lucid Air are not credible. I think the technology that they showed, to the extent they showed it, did not look like technology that would deliver what they were promising. Just as an example, if you follow Tesla, Elon has been talking about, okay, we've been doing this battery module thing, and we really need to get rid of modules and go to cell to pack. And then at Battery Day, they went to structural pack, which is like a major leap forward. And you can see how that's going to be a big gain in vehicle efficiency, vehicle performance. And Lucid is still doing cells to modules. And, what kind of cells are they using? Well, I believe they're using 2170 cells. We don't know what chemistry they're using. They didn't say. I thought that was a big miss. Why didn't you tell us what chemistry? There wasn't enough substance in the reveal to say it. And what you've got is this claim that we're going to deliver a sedan that's roughly the same size as the Tesla Model S. We're going to deliver it with 100 miles more range than the longest range Model S, with a 0 to 60 time faster than that. And I don't think it's credible that they can do that. And I don't think they can do it at scale, and I don't think they can secure the batteries for it. And there's a whole bunch of things there. And if they had said, listen, we're going to deliver a 300-mile range vehicle, that would be more credible. The idea that they were going to have better engineering than Tesla. And there was a little fluff with this guy's the chief engineer for the Model S, and Elon, if you saw Elon's tweet, he said, well, he was involved with the Model S. He made some contributions, but he left us before at a bad time, and it wasn't that much. And there's a lot of other details that we could get into, but that's I was disappointed. I don't think they can deliver. And I would just say this, February 18th, I've been saying for a while, there's no way they can deliver this spring. They've been claiming they're going to deliver this spring. They've been saying they're going to do 6,000 vehicles in 2021. And I said they will not be able to deliver a vehicle this spring, and they won't deliver vehicles in 2021, or they won't deliver many vehicles in 2021. And 5 days after I tweeted, basically, I almost guaranteed they won't deliver vehicles in the spring. 5 days later, they had the SPAC merger, and an hour later, they said, we're not delivering vehicles in the spring. We pushed back deliveries to the fall, to the second half of the year, and they reduced their target for 2021 to 577 vehicles, down from 6,000. So I called that, and then all there's a lot of people who are angry at me for my position, and I was right, and they don't give me any credit for being right. So
I see a lot of credit on Twitter for you.
No, there's people who support me, but the people who are supporting Lucid don't recognize I was right when I said they wouldn't deliver in the spring. So so that's my take in short, and I could probably say a lot more. And people
there's a lot
watch
there.
My videos now. So, but just what's your take? Why do you believe in Lucid? What do you see in this that I'm missing?
Yeah, so I've heard you make the comment about the specs being like beyond the realm of what's possible, and I want to start right there first and foremost. The long range Model S today is a 400-mile EV, right, which is identical to what Lucid is offering with their smaller pack of their car. And then when you step up to, I think it's like the Touring and the Dream Edition, the higher end ones, they have 517-mile ranges, which is, again, similar to what Tesla's going to be offering with the Plaid Plus. So the numbers aren't crazy at all. And it is probably the most telling reason for why I am interested in what Lucid did. The event, as you mentioned it, I enjoyed it. I thought it was kind of it felt very Apple. It felt very much like, don't worry about the spec, talk about the experience of it, which I think is how they're positioning themselves, okay? So if you're coming out swinging, Tesla and Elon is an engineering nerd company. They come out with sledgehammers and have fun, and they get traction, and they get people on social media talking about it from that respect. I think what Lucid did, first of all, when you're going after the king directly, which is what you're doing when you have a Model S equivalent, you have to kind of figure out what's your angle. And so they were thinking, well, this is going to be a little bit more of a luxury car. And you've mentioned, and this is fair, they kind of go back and forth on this. Are we targeting Tesla? Are we targeting Mercedes and Audi? But their goal is to say, if you were going to go buy an S-Class or an E-Class, you're in the market for an A6 or an A8, 7 Series BMW, check out this car now as an option. Where I think the refreshed Model S is also much more luxurious, but I think their appointment, their attention to details, materials, and stuff is more of a luxury car kind of segment. So that being said, their argument, or I think their reveal, was more like Apple, which is, we're not here to tell you about how many gigahertz and how many gigs of RAM our iPhone has. We're here to talk about like what you can do with it, which I think, depending on how you like it, which preference you have, you might view that differently. But their entire presentation, to me, showed me how you get to that level of efficiency. I just drove the Chevy Bolt, by the way, and I did a 50-mile trip in Los Angeles, and it had 4.1 miles per kilowatt hour. Which,
that's good.
Yeah, it's actually pretty good for a car like that. It's not really that aerodynamic or sculpted, but they've made moves there. But what Lucid has done really with their approach is, I think, is novel and interesting. So they have like 400 or 500 patents around some of this stuff. But first of all, moving to a higher voltage architecture is an important move. The higher the voltage that you're working with, the lower the current needs to be. So the wire sizing is lower, the heat that is produced is lower. And if you look at their motor assembly in particular, higher motor assembly with the inverter, the gearbox, and all of it that's a function of having a higher voltage architecture. So if you're running a 480-ish volt system like what Tesla is doing, that means you have twice the current coming in. So Lucid's motor, by the way, operates at 900 volt, which means you're going to have more heat and stuff. One of the patents that Lucid has, which I found fascinating too, I don't know if you remember this from the reveal, is how they cool their windings in their motor. So they have this axial jet manifold. That's engineering nerd talk. But what they're doing is they have this structure. They have a methodology of cooling the motor at the winding level. So the closest part to where the heat is produced. The three ways you can cool a motor would be like a jacket on the outside, which is the worst way. That means that the heat has to transfer from the copper windings out through the body of the motor assembly and out to the jacket. The better way is to have cooling channels in the motor assembly. Tesla does this. Most people do this. And that's great. Now you get the transfer of heat from the windings to the aluminum, whatever the casing of the motor assembly is, and then out. And this is even more directly applied. So this is kind of like going from air cooling to liquid cooling for a computer processor, for example, which allows you to run at a higher clock speed, generate more heat, and still be able to pump it out. And combine that with an 900-volt architecture, you're going to have better efficiency, and you don't need as much thermal mass. You don't need as much metal to be able to absorb that heat. So that's kind of the kind of cool stuff that happens there. And as I heard their presentation, I'll give you another example. They went on, and as an engineer, I love this kind of nerd stuff. Most people, like I remember most people probably tuned out. They were talking about their headlight assembly. They have this LED array. Tesla has some
Yeah.
all LEDs as well, but they have a team of optical engineers who work on the lighting array. So they're trying to get maximum illumination on the road, better safety and better visibility while using less power. The average car today either has a halogen headlight, which runs on 55, 60 watts or so per bulb, so that's 120, or luxury cars have like xenon HID, high intensity discharge headlights, where gas is excited and lets out light. That, depending on how you tune it, could be 35 to 60 watts as well. The LEDs on my Tesla Model S are way less than that, and they put out similar levels of light. And Lucid is doing the same sort of thing. So to me, if you're an engineering company, you obsess about this kind of stuff. If you have every bulb in that car is an LED, just like your Tesla. Average cars like Toyotas today, like the Corolla, still has bulbs in it, which is, to me, is absurd because LEDs are way cheaper now. But when you talk about how you're going to tackle the entire subsystem, how does the entire car operate? What is the wattage draw of every single piece of the entire car? That's how you get to the efficiency numbers. And by the way, Peter Rawlinson, I think, said, I could be wrong on this, but the exact number was 4.57 or so miles per kilowatt hour. Which,
that sounds
again,
about right.
which is not crazy. That's my Model S. My Model 3. My Model 3 is 4.57. So it's not crazy. What's crazy is that they did that with a car that's a little bit bigger than the Model 3. So again, the numbers aren't radical at all. And the reason why they have the 500-mile range EV is they have a 117 kilowatt battery pack. They're sticking more batteries in it, but at the same time, in a more efficient manner as well. So they don't have 150 batteries in it. For example, the Rivian has 300 miles of range, but they need 180 kilowatt hours or something like that.
You said you sat in a vehicle. Which one did you sit in?
The Lucid Air?
So did you sit in the one with the larger pack, or did you sit in the one with the smaller pack?
Good question. I sat in the one with the bigger pack.
So did you sit in the rear seat?
Yeah.
And was the rear seat floor high?
The rear seat floor is higher, yeah, than the low range pack.
I saw a video of that. It wasn't your video, with this guy sitting in the back, and his knees were significantly elevated. It didn't look like a comfortable seating position to sit in that back seat. So I think that I just have this take on it that I think you are in. I'm an outlier, and most of the people who have looked at Lucid see it the way you do. All of the details you described sound good, but I don't.
Even just what you said about the seating position, that is the consequence of having a battery pack, and every car company is gonna have to go through this, right? But that's exactly.
But the Tesla Model S doesn't have a high rear seat floor because
the Tesla Model S doesn't have a 500-mile range car yet, right? And we don't know much about the platform.
Neither does Lucid. Lucid doesn't have a 500-mile range car yet either. They claim to have a 500-mile range car. When they actually deliver a 500-mile range car, we'll see that. Anybody can say we've got a 500-mile range car. Nikola has a Badger, right? They have this great truck. They have this great semi, but they haven't delivered it yet. Tesla's actually delivered a 400-mile range Model S. People have driven it. That's a huge difference. And this is my point. You can say you've got it, but they haven't demonstrated it. And one of the key details, and I'm going to say this, you didn't drive it, right?
No. You
saw it, you sat in it. Everyone who's been involved from the media has at best, there was one, I think it was Motor Trend. There was one Motor Trend journalist who sat in the back of the 500 plus mile range one when they drove from like Los Angeles to San Francisco or something like that. They didn't let her plug in her cell phone because they wanted to eke every mile of range they could out of it, but they didn't let her drive it. They have not let an automotive journalist drive the car. Now, in the interview with Bloomberg, Ed Ludlow interviewed Peter Rawlinson, and Peter Rawlinson said that Alan Mulally, the former Ford CEO who's with Churchill Capital, he drove the car, thought it was wonderful, but then said, wait until you have it right. Well, wait a minute. Was it wonderful, or does it need something to be fixed? And here's my take. If Lucid wants to demonstrate that they have a great car, and he says that Alan Mulally thought it was a great car, then let Danielle of the Wall Street Journal drive it. Let Road Track, Motor Trend, Car and Driver, let 2 or 3 automotive journalists who are real drive the car, and not the guy from the LA Times, not Russ Mitchell, because he's a biased reporter. But Motor 10, Mart, Car and Track. Let Blake Fuller, who drove the Performance Model 3 on the Pikes Peak Challenge, let some independent people drive this car. Don't just tell me Alan Mullally drove it and said it was wonderful. He's not independent, and he didn't even say it himself. So Jay Leno drove the Cybertruck. I mean, he let Jay Leno drive the Cybertruck. And people. So that's, I think, a major distinction is it's hard. Here's the deal. You could be. So I'm wearing my, for those who know, I've got a line of t-shirts. Check out elonbits.com. It's in the description below. I am wearing the Elon Be Less Wrong t-shirt. I acknowledge I could be wrong. Okay. I might be wrong. My goal is to be less wrong. I am asking Lucid to prove me wrong by letting automotive journalists drive the car. So if he said this was the first car off the production line. They were ready to deliver in June, right? And they were doing production vehicles, and he said it was a great car. They've been saying it's a great car for 5 years. They've had a prototype for like 5 years. Prove me wrong by letting automotive journalists drive the car. And then we'll see. But we don't even know how many people have driven the car. I have asked people who I know somebody who works at Lucid. Really, have they driven the car? No. Well, who's driven this car? Do you know anyone? Has Peter Rawlinson driven the car? I don't even know if Peter Rawlinson has driven the car.
Yeah, I do know of some people who've driven the car, but this feedback I think is spot on. I think the next step for them is to open this up and get journalists driving the car. I 100% agree with you on this point. As far as what you were saying earlier, the details of so I mean, every car company has to go through this. Like, there's at some point you have to understand they have a car, they are trying to produce it, they have a factory, they're trying to get it all dialed in. You mentioned the delay that they had. I'm not surprised at all. As I'm trying to read some of the comments, and clearly everybody's with you on this, which is so funny. The funny thing is, I remember back in
one second.
Sure.
Hi, Jessica Kirsch, who is a YouTuber who's been down
Jessica
at.
Hey, Jessica.
She's been down in Austin and Boca Chica. Just wanted to recognize Jessica because I'm a fan of hers. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. So I remember that I had the same exact arguments with people 5 or 6 years ago about Tesla, 8 years ago with Tesla. The exact same arguments. Some of these were like verbatim from the comment section. So the fact of the matter is Tesla, we now trust because they've delivered, right? And so when the Cybertruck, for example, wasn't engineering complete and changing, we didn't worry because we know we're going to get a Cybertruck looking thing. It might be an inch shorter, it might be this, it might be that, but we're going to get a Cybertruck. We know it. The Roadster is even more abstract. I think when they showed it, it wasn't really even possible because the 4680 was what was needed, and that's why they haven't worked on it yet. But we know they're going to do an incredible car because they're Tesla and they've proven it. So my argument is, like, until a car company can do it, until you prove it and you build cars, like, how can you prove it? It's kind of a circular logic thing. And you have to remember too, like, building a car is crazy hard and expensive.
But let me just point something out.
Like, for example, the Model 3.
But let me just point something out. You said 8 years ago. 8 years ago was 2013. So 2013, the Model S was already in production and the Roadster had a 4-year run. Tesla didn't IPO until they had a car. They didn't go public until the Roadster had been driving. So I think the IPO was 2011. So they didn't have the Model S yet, but they had delivered the Roadster. They had actually delivered a functioning car. And they had the Model S prototype. I don't know whether they let anyone drive it before they had the IPO. But they had actually delivered a working car. Lucid hasn't delivered a working car. And let me just, one other point that really stood out to me. When I get responses from the Lucid fan community, well, let me ask you this. What was Lucid's role in Formula E?
What was Lucid's role in Formula E?
They brag about their role in Formula E. What was their role?
Okay, I'll touch on that in a second. I want to just quickly go back to where you mentioned about the Roadster. So Tesla's move with the Roadster was brilliant because they didn't actually have to deal with the powertrain or any of that sort of stuff or the chassis. They got a part shipped from Lotus that they then put their powertrain and their batteries and inverters and shipped a car. So that's, like, from a labor intensive perspective, a lot easier to do, right? You can just have they bought the new factory.
That's not true. That's not true. Elon said they basically had to rebuild the whole car. That it didn't work. The idea was we're going to take a Lucid, a Lotus chassis,
they didn't make it for very long. They didn't make very many of them.
No, but they basically had to remake the whole car. But it's not true that it was easy to make the Roadster. It was extremely hard to make the Roadster. They were going to do a 2-speed transmission. That didn't work. They had to go to 1-speed transmission.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of exaggeration. They didn't remake the car. The chassis is the chassis. If they were to remake the chassis, they'd be out of their minds. Then why would you pay Lotus for that, right? So they didn't do that.
I think that's what Elon said. It was a disaster.
Yeah, I'm sure it was because, again, this wasn't built to be an EV. So I'm sure it was a disaster. And that's why they're not making them anymore, and they're not going to do that anymore. But the Model S was their own, and that was really when it came into their own. So you can think of it as Lucid never had the Roadster moment. They didn't go buy a chassis and do this thing. They just started from until we have a plant where we can manufacture, we have nothing. So that's where they're at. You mentioned, what was the next question you had, by the way?
Darn it.
Actually, I one more thing really quick while we're talking about this. Talking about those early days with Lotus and Lucid. I don't know if the viewers know this part of the story, but that's where Elon met Peter Rawlinson, was working at Lotus. He was an engineer at Lotus, and he was impressed, and he recruited him. He went out and said, "Hey, come work for Tesla," and he did. So there's a lot of, there's like negative Peter Rawlinson sentiment, which I don't get, because I think Peter's a really cool dude. I love when engineers run companies. I think we need to see more of that in the world. But so from there, he went on his own and started Lucid, and people have given him grief about this. But flip that around. Let's say somebody has a company and says, Elon Musk, come work for me. How long does Elon stay before he goes out on his own, right? I think part of it is ambition. That's kind of how the Valley works. This ties into another point you had earlier. I'm trying to tie this all together, but you mentioned in what world might Lucid have better engineers than Tesla? And you kind of showed an incredulity about how that could be. So I work in the software industry, and Silicon Valley, which is where like both these companies are located, is cutthroat. You're an attorney, and so attorneys normally are. The longer you are with the same firm, you get profit sharing, and you become partner. Is the opposite for engineers. For engineers, what ends up happening is you're on a team and you're a great engineer, and you get passed over once or twice. And you know what? Screw it. I'm going to go and recruit and go somewhere else. So I get emails from like Snapchat and Airbnb and Uber and Google and Apple like on a weekly basis, right? So one thing I've learned is the first thing you do if you're a startup, you go after the best engineers from every other company. So what'll shock you is early days of Uber, their engineering talent was probably better than any of those companies because they can't afford to have a bad engineer. Microsoft with 100,000 engineers, if you have 10,000 bad ones, they'll never even notice. But you get bad people early on at a company, at a tech startup, you're doomed, right? So as far as can Lucid have better engineers? Absolutely. On average, how does that stack? I don't know. But if you have to know, like there's some guy at Tesla who is a good engineer, and somebody at Lucid offered him more money or this or that, and he's working over there. That's literally business, right? It happens all the time. The gentleman, I was just reading about this before the show in kind of research mode. The gentleman who kind of founded the Cruise team, Super Cruise team for GM, is now working on the Advanced Driver Assistance Systems team at Lucid. That's kind of how it goes. So as far as could this company have better engineers? Yeah, absolutely, they could. Overall,
let's come back to the engineers in a minute. The question I asked you, and fortunately, this is one of the great things about chat, is somebody reminded me what my question
Formula
was. What was Lucid's role in Lucid Ativa? What was their role in Formula E?
Great. So Formula E, if you guys are watching, it's pretty cool. If you're a Lucid, if you're a Tesla fan, a Lucid fan, EV general enthusiast, Formula E is one of those things that kind of puts it on the forefront of people's minds. So the first 4 seasons of Formula E, the pack that they were using, I don't know where they came from, didn't have the density, didn't have the capacity to last an entire race. So there was no charging, there was no pack swap. They literally swapped cars. So you'd hop out of your car and hop into the second car to finish the race. Now, if you're showcasing why EVs are amazing and they're going to replace gas cars, that's a terrible look. Like, you can't even finish a race in a car with an EV. What are you talking about, right? So seasons 5 and 6 so far, Lucid Motors has provided the pack. So they provide this pack with so we'll talk. You mentioned before, like, they don't make the cells. What are they doing? We'll talk about that in a second. But seasons 5 and 6, and I think they have a contract for a few more years through. I forget the details. Somebody, if you know in the contract, you can write it out. But they started to provide the pack in seasons 5 and 6 of Formula E, and once they did, the racers now could finish a race on one pack, on one charge. So that is their involvement.
So I agree with you that is roughly what they did. The problem is that Lucid, somehow or other, people got the idea that Lucid provided the batteries. and that is false. Not you didn't say it, but it is widespread in the corporate trolls who are trolling Twitter and trolling my my YouTube account. They are promoting this false idea that Lucid provided the batteries. Sony and Murata, Sony and a Sony spinoff called Murata provided the battery cells. So it is misleading to say that it's misleading. But I'm not saying that you said it.
Well,
but
let's
somehow the
that
idea got out
you
there
said battery,
that
right?
they provided the cell. They did not provide the cells.
Well, you said battery earlier. Now you're saying cells. So you can say Lucid provided the battery, which is a pack of cells, not the cell. But I mean, in the same way, you're talking about the end product, right? The end product is this package. It includes a battery management system. It includes cooling ribbons for Formula E, which means they're flooring it 24 hours constantly, right? So if you don't want battery degradation and you don't want your BMS to overheat and have to bring down the power output, you have to have cooling and stuff. So their product is the battery, if you will, the pack. The cells they do not make, and yeah, they've never purported to make.
No,
so
but
anyone
what
who
I'm
tells
saying
you,
is that what I'm saying is that they don't mention Sony Murata in any of their press, and a lot of people got the idea. And I listen, I'm very cynical about Lucid, and I think Lucid is playing. So you have you have this side where Lucid is just this innocent company that's trying to make a great product, and I have this mindset that there are evil people running Lucid who are trying to deceive people, and that's a mindset that's really hard to bridge.
Right. So I mean, if some person on your Twitter feed said something about Lucid, that's not Lucid the company. Who at Lucid is telling people?
How do you know that?
What?
How do you know that?
Oh, okay.
How do you know that Lucid is? If they're evil, then they're sending out corporate trolls to promote their message.
I mean, a conversation like this, it's hard for me to. I mean, what can I say? I have no idea, right? But what I'm saying is, if Lucid does not produce cells, there's few companies in the world that do. Until 2021, Tesla didn't. They have a cell plant, and Panasonic, which is one of the companies in this world that makes cells, they did. So yeah, that clearly, if there was any kind of misconceptions there, Lucid makes the pack, the pack for Formula E. So to that point earlier, you mentioned chemistry as a major factor for the performance of a battery. At the core, that's the heart, that's the beating part of it, and you're totally right. But there's more to it. You can have the best chemistry, you can have the best cells in the world, and you stick them in like an air-cooled, non-ribbon, liquidly cooled system, they're going to heat up in no time. The BMS is going to say we're at battery overcharge, and you'll be limping home. It won't work. It won't matter. So the cooling system is important. Part of what, I mean, Lucid, I think they mentioned this Formula E thing because Formula E cars are floored. Like you have the accelerator pushed down all the way. Thank you, MD, for the super chat. You have the pedal pushed down the entire race. So those packs are drawing and discharging at a very high rate. And as a result, they're going to get heat. They're going to heat up, and you have to handle that very well. So that's part of what their expertise goes into, right? They also have some IP, by the way. I'm not too familiar, so I'm not going to speak out of turn. But when I do my factory tour, I'm going to try to capture this as much as I can. They have this kind of single-piece injection pack structure. You're right; it's not a structural pack. They still have packs, and even the way the pack is formed, I believe it's without having to solder the
They still have
packs
modules.
into parallel. Right,
They have modules. Yeah.
But I will say, here's a I love, as much as I love Tesla, one question I have, you go to a structural pack, how easy is it to crumple up a car and have it salvaged and have to replace it? If you have a structural pack, you have a single large casting.
That.
Sure.
I get that question a lot. So first of all, if you follow what they said on Battery Day, because of the structural pack, the pack is narrower. It's further from the edge of the vehicle, so it's actually more protected from a crash than a current battery pack. The other thing is, if it gets that far, then you have frame damage, and the car is going to be a total loss anyway. And anytime you have frame damage on a car, almost anytime you have frame damage on a car, it's considered a total loss. So if you get to the structural pack, you've damaged the frame and it's over. So that's not really a significant problem. But the thing about Formula E, there's a key detail about Formula E that I wanted to cover, which is, I'm not saying it's nothing. I want to be clear. I'm not trying to say they didn't do anything with Formula E, but it's a different battery chemistry because Sony Murata cells are a different battery than what LG Chem is going to provide. And the purpose, the whole idea, if a Formula E battery cell only has to last one race, next race you put in hold. And to be fair, you do want to replace them because it is so hard on the batteries, the way they drive. Have you watched one? They start at 100% and they go to 0%, and they're rapid charging and the rapid regen, and every corner they're slowing down the regen, and then they're accelerating again. And you can actually see, if you should watch a Formula E race because it's really kind of cool. You can see what their battery, they'll display on the screen how much battery each car has left. And each car finishes the race like as close to zero as they can. But that's really, really hard in the cells. So the battery cells only have to last one cycle. You can't make a regular car with 1 cycle life batteries. They have to have 1,000 cycle life, 2,000 cycle life, 5,000 cycle life batteries. And it's a completely different problem. And the battery pack that they had for Formula E is a completely different shape. It's this the battery pack that they're using in the Air, the battery pack that Tesla uses, is flat. This battery pack that they're using is more like vertical. So
it fits into the tub of the Formula E of the chassis. I will say the engineering attributes required to make a pack output as much C, the current per energy density, to make that as high as possible is the same as what is needed for longevity and everything else. So it's
not the same. That's actually totally different. One is to abuse the battery.
What I'm saying is the engineering design.
Race.
So when you take those cells into a pack, you got to suck out the heat. You got to be able to take the heat out of the pack. That's also good for longevity. Now, the chemistry there is different, right? And I think for the Formula E, they use 18650s, whereas for their car, they're using 2170s. So it's kind of like Model S and X versus 3 and Y, if you will.
But you're not maximizing longevity. You don't care about longevity. You just want one race out of it.
The engineering design considerations are the same.
Okay, we're gonna have to agree to disagree on that. But I wanted to come back. So
besides removing as much heat as possible, what would you do in a consumer car for max longevity?
I think there's a whole bunch of factors. Number one, you've got to design it. You've got to, first of all, just as an example, a modern car has to operate when it's 20 degrees below zero, and it has to operate when it's 120 degrees out. The Formula E cars are, generally speaking, operating in a much simpler range of temperatures.
Right.
But the modern car is not going to be experiencing the same charge rates and the same discharge rates that you're seeing. Even Roadster, even the Plaid Plus Model S, they're not going to be, I don't think they're going to be exposing to the same harshness of performance that you're seeing. And I think it's a huge difference to try to optimize for cycle life of 4,000 cycles or 2,500 cycles versus 1 cycle.
So I'm not saying, I want to be clear.
I want to be clear. I'm not saying it's nothing. I think that they did something of value with Formula E and they earned some credit for it. But they play it up like this means we're great at all aspects of engineering and we understand batteries as well as Tesla.
Where are you getting that from? Can you send
not
me a
that
link
you're saying it.
No. I want to know.
But this goes back to the point about they're claiming they have better engineers than Tesla. They have to have better engineers than Tesla to deliver more range and faster 0 to 60 time than the Model S long range. They have to be claiming that. And I don't think it's a credible claim. And the example, like when you say, well, they're using 900 volt architecture, the Porsche Taycan uses double the voltage of the Tesla Model S, and it only achieves a little over 200 miles of range. It's a great car. I think the Porsche Taycan is one of the best EVs out there.
Have you driven
Tesla.
one?
No.
I got over 370 miles on a Taycan. So I think the first thing with Porsche, and this is not really part of the debate, but the crazy people at Porsche, whoever does the EPA estimations needs to be fired because that car is not even close to that. It's much higher. For whatever reason, I think what they're doing is when you floor it and you don't get anywhere near the range, if your customers are happy with 200 miles, at least you're not disappointing. I think that's their approach. But the Taycan gets far more EPA range, or far more real world range than the EPA estimate. But anyways,
so that was your experience. Everything I've seen, I agree with you that other people who have driven the Taycan have said they got more range than Porsche claimed. That Porsche is outperforming their range estimate, and Tesla may even slightly underperform their range estimate. But I haven't seen anybody else claim they got 370 miles on a Taycan. I've seen 250, 270. I haven't seen anybody claim 370. So, I don't know what conditions you drove the Taycan has a particular advantage on the highway because it's got 2 forward gears. So when it goes up to a higher forward gear, they're able to optimize that second gear to get better highway range. And I don't think that plays a big role in the EPA rating. because you don't drive at very high speeds. And I think the EPA rating goes up to maybe 55 miles an hour when they do their test. So that would tend to diminish Porsche Taycan's performance on the EPA rating. But even if you got 370 miles, Lucid is claiming you got 140 miles more range than the Taycan.
You're talking about the long range version?
The Lucid that's claiming 517 miles of range is claiming 140 miles more range than the Taycan.
Let me try to break down.
But you have to believe they have better engineers than Porsche.
So this is I don't know what the name of the fallacy here is, but okay, so let's break it down a little bit. First of all, to get to that number, 4.57 miles per kilowatt hour times 117 kilowatt hours on their battery pack, that's how you get to that number. It's not crazy or out of this world or anything. It's basically Model 3 performance numbers. Like if I put a 117 kilowatt battery pack in my Model 3, I'd have 517 miles of range as well. So it's not anything crazy. That's the first thing to point out.
It's not quite that simple. The longer range Model 3s don't get the same efficiency as the standard range Model 3. They lose a little bit of range because you're adding weight.
So
they lose a little bit. They lose a little bit of efficiency because you're adding weight.
But fair enough. So they're getting that with the dual or tri-motor configuration and stuff. So there's improvements and stuff. So the question about do they have better engineers? I mentioned that earlier. They make it their point to. All startups do. When you get funding to make a startup, the first thing you do is go poach the best people you can find everywhere else. The same way Tesla started. Tesla poached tons of people from the legacy automakers when they started out. And,
okay, so let me turn this to something else. So for months, I was saying I don't think that Lucid will be able to deliver. For months, Lucid was claiming we're going to deliver cars in the spring of 2021, and we're going to deliver 6,000 cars in 2021. And we do have some Warren haters, Lucid lovers in the chat now.
There's a bunch of Ricky or Warren lovers because some guy named Marshall River saying Ricky is lying now. I'm not sure what that was in reference to, but
just so people know, Ricky and I are arguing. I think we actually like each other, and we knew that we were going to go head to head on this. But this doesn't mean I don't like Ricky, and I hope Ricky doesn't dislike me. But this is supposed to be a fun argument. I hope. But so if anybody thinks I'm mad at Ricky, you're wrong, and I hope Ricky's not mad at me. But so there was this moment, like I said earlier, February 18th. I specifically called it. I had said it before. They're not going to be able to deliver cars and things. My thesis is they can't deliver a car because they can't meet the specs. They can't let an automotive journalist drive the car because they can't meet the specs. And the fact that they haven't let that they let Alan Mulally allegedly drive the car, but they haven't let an automotive journalist drive the car, shows they can't meet the specs. And this is where I want to be clear about something. The fact that the thing that got me, I would say, angrier, when I made the first video, I was just like, okay, this is a fraud. This bothers me. Let me show what I think is wrong with this. But what happened this month, that they continued building up. It's funny. Somebody said, I think it was Francois Couture, which I think is a fake name because it sounds like French culture. I think it translates to French culture, Francois Couture. But I've had a number of people say I invested in CCIV and I lost tens of thousands of dollars because of this. They were pumping, and a week before they did the SPAC merger, Peter Rawlinson was on Fox News continuing the claim we're going to deliver 6,000 vehicles in 2021, and we're going to deliver vehicles in the spring. And he had to know a week before the SPAC merger. They've been talking about doing due diligence for a long time. And he describes a conversation he had with Alan Mulally where they decided, okay, don't deliver the vehicles yet. Let's wait. He had to know before that appearance on Fox News a week before the SPAC merger. He had to. I mean, it's always possible that Alan Mulally drove the car 3 days before the SPAC merger, but these things don't happen that fast. He had to know. He had to be lying. At some point along the way, he knew we can't possibly deliver 6,000 cars. And there's evidence of it in if anybody looks for Lucid Motors investor relations, I think you can find there's a PDF with this slide deck, what they presented after they had. And by the way, at the reveal and at the investor presentation they just did for the SPAC merger, in both cases, no journalist Q&A. They did not take a single question. At the reveal, they said they had journalists present and they were going to take questions and do answers, and they did not have a Q&A. Elon he'll do a Q&A. He will take hostile questions from journalists and investors who are critical of Tesla. He will take hostile questions and he will handle them. They have not taken a hostile question from a hostile journalist yet. They've been doing puff journalism. But this key point that they were lying to the world about what was going to happen with deliveries. And we know that it was a lie because in the slide deck, they revealed that they have 7,500 reservations at $650 million in revenue. If every reservation goes through with a purchase, right? And when you work out the numbers, that means about 6,000 of the reservations were for the Air Pure, which wouldn't be delivered till 2022. So they only had at most 1,500 reservations for cars that were supposed to be delivered in 2021. They knew they could. And he told Jim Cramer from Mad Money, he told Jim Cramer, we have a bulging order book. He was lying, he was misleading, he was misrepresenting the state. They only have 7,500 orders. Cybertruck has like 1 million orders. 7,500 reservations, they're not even really orders. That was lie. So how can you defend what, to me, they were obviously lying in February before the SPAC merger, right up until the SPAC merger? They were lying about when they were going to deliver, how much they were going to deliver. How can you defend that?
So the way I look at this is we can look at the business and the SPAC and all of that business about Lucid. And then there's the engineering at Lucid, right? I'm much more concerned with the engineering at Lucid. To your point, it sounds like, you've looked into this and I don't really know. The fundamental fact is they have a factory that they've built. It's ready to go. Now is the very hard problem of getting a perfectly, harmonious production line.
What did you see in the factory? You went in the factory. What did you see?
No, so I went to their headquarters, and their factory tour will be at some point in the future, maybe in a couple of weeks, something like that. But I saw their their headquarters where they have all their alpha and beta production cars where they're doing tests, and they were actually doing like road tests while I was there on various systems and stuff. And you can kind of see the progress of these different models. Like you can see some of them have like telemetry in the center console and they're like doing data, collection. Others, they're doing like fit and finish stuff and they're making final adjustments. Like for example, I actually, in one line that I saw, they were showing kind of the frunk, for example. I think maybe they've repositioned some components and made some changes between like alpha and beta cars. Where the frunk grew in size, the tub was bigger. I was able to kind of hold it and see how they've evolved. So they should be at a production car now. And from what I was hearing, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think production units from the factory are now rolling off the line for various tests. There's a whole like process here. Like there's probably like crash testing and there's a lot of regulatory hoops still to go through to get fully licensed or certified to be able to make these cars in mass. So that is where they are now. And to your point about like calling them a scam and stuff, to me that sounds like a weird comment to make when we have a company that's trying to build a car and they're close. They have a car. They have by the way, there's a ton of this. I think is what makes me the most kind of disappointed is people are joking about Nikola and stuff. Here's something I was researching this when I looked into this. When Nikola was up there talking about all this hoo-ha and whatever else, they had 300 employees. Okay, they had 300 employees and like 12 products out there. They were going to go build hydrogen, and Trevor Milton didn't even know what hydrogen was. In his keynote, I was watching one of the videos. The man doesn't even understand like how it's generated. He doesn't understand that. So that is not what Lucid has. One car. There's one product. They're making the Lucid Air. That's it. They have 2,000 employees, and they're hiring. They went SPAC, right? They're a publicly traded company. Shortly, they have money in the bank, which is what you need for the next step. Tesla has raised funds throughout to get to where they are now. Now they feel like a powerhouse. Like they could, like when they say Cybertruck is coming, I have no doubt. That's such a cool feeling because of where they've gotten to. So Lucid still has all that to prove. And it's all kind of ahead of us, right? To your point about sales and stuff, first of all, you got to understand how hard it is to do this. I mentioned I drove the Bolt. Those didn't sell well. They were sitting in lots. You could go in there and negotiate down $7,000 from sticker and have a Bolt not too long ago. So the funny thing is, what Tesla is masters of is building desirable products first and foremost that then happen to be really good for the environment and everything else. That's the winning formula. I think Lucid has that. This is subjective, of course. You do or you don't like it. I think the Lucid Air is a really good looking car, and from what I've seen, I think they've put in the due diligence. They have the kind of a team needed to put this together. They have a factory they're about to get into. Now, I'll be the first to tell you, and this is not based on I don't know anything. I could be wrong, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's closer to the end of the year before they have cars. I mean, they have been operating with the pandemic. Like, Rivian, which was supposed to have a car last year. They're a year delayed or 6 months or whatever it is. This is a tough thing to do, guys, right? That's the fundamental thing about it. And as far as, not believing in them and stuff, I think that's up to you. Everybody has their prerogative. But I guess what I'm saying is the business side of it, what they have to do to raise funds and stuff. I think maybe you can speak to that a little more than I can. I guess my perspective really is from the engineering side. Do they have the factory? Do they have the sort of a team? Do they have the technology that would make sense? Does it line up? By the way, the one thing I kind of mentioned this earlier, but when the Model S was refreshed, I think the previous earnings call or the one before that, Elon kind of mentioned the Model S and the X really, we make them out of nostalgia. Like they were basically, he was saying, if you'll have one, we'll make it. You can have it. That's about it. So when Lucid comes out and they did the Laguna Seca lap, and by the way, about the range test, I believe Car and Driver, Bloomberg, Motor Trend have all had range tests with it. They weren't driving, but they've done the range tests. If somebody has links, we can try to find it. Or the next time you talk, I can see if I can find it.
I agree. Motor Trend sat in the back of the car and watched them drive at that distance. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, I agree that Motor Trend, I don't need to send links. Motor Trend definitely did something where they rode in the car and it went the distance. I'm not disputing that. I do want to agree with you on a couple things. I agree with you that the Lucid Air is not ugly. I think people could definitely view that as I don't think it's an unattractive or attractive. I think it looks fine. I would even go so far as say, I do think is an attractive car. The prototypes that I've seen, I went to the showroom, I saw it. And I agree with you, this is not Nikola. And this is actually, the Nikola comparison is really important because Nikola was a terribly weak, incompetent fraud. I am claiming, and this is an extreme claim, and I realize this is a hard to believe claim. I'm saying this is an elaborate fraud. That's my opinion. Again, I want to be clear, this is an opinion. I'm not saying I've been inside and I have inside information. I know it's a fraud. I'm saying it looks to me like it's an elaborate fraud, and that's an extreme case. And it's just that I see a lot of signs like that. I believe that they lied about the number of orders when they said they had a bulging order book, when they knew they did not have enough orders to satisfy the production numbers that they said they were going to achieve. But it is having Peter Rawlinson is a much better face for your fraud than Trevor Milton. Trevor Milton is an incompetent boor. Peter Rawlinson is a slick, some engineering history. He's got the Bond villain accent. That's the funny part about it is that they chose a guy who has the Bond villain accent. And I'm not saying that's fair. I'm just saying
it's super not fair.
Okay, but in this
he was recruited by Elon Musk for being really good from Lotus. That's how this story started. I think all the way that to now the Bond villain accent. It's
Elon was swayed by the accent. Obviously, Elon was impressed by his accent. No, it's clear that Peter Rawlinson has some engineering chops. He's and they have a lot of credible people on their team. It's actually, when you brought up the number of employees, that's actually one of my biggest concerns. Is do you live in Silicon? I know you're on the West Coast. Do you live in Silicon Valley?
No, I work with companies up there, but I live in San Diego.
Okay, so I lived in Silicon Valley for a few years. I feel like I don't know Silicon Valley as well as somebody who actually worked in Silicon Valley, but I was in grad school out there. And there's a Silicon Valley culture, and there's a specific nature to a startup. And the way it used to be with startups, which is they would be lean. You would have a lean startup. And if you look at that slide deck, there's a page on the slide deck with 19 people in suits with vice president titles or managing director titles. And that is not a lean operation. And you keep saying they have a factory. They have a building that they're calling a factory. It hasn't produced anything yet. We don't know what's inside that factory. No one has. It was funny. This is one of those things. This is one of those moments again where I'm critical of the people who are positive about Lucid, and I'm specifically referring to CNBC here. There's a video. If you go to CNBC's channel and you search for Lucid, they did a look inside Lucid's factory, and I watched the video. They didn't have a journalist in the video. They just put a video up that Lucid produced and pretended it was journalism. And they had a camera shot of inside the factory, and there's a bunch of machines, and they had a camera shot, and there's a bunch of cars in a line. But no journalist walked in the factory to see what was going on. That could have been stock footage from some other factory. We have no idea. Who has actually been inside the factory, seen the factory in operation? We don't know. And that's what I mean by the elaborate fraud. But the signal, there are signs when you're looking for, is this a fraud or not? There are signs. And the fact that they're not lean. You do not build a startup like this. And why are they opening showrooms when they're not even going to deliver vehicles?
Well, so if you don't have pre-orders, or if you don't have enough pre-orders, you need showrooms. You need showrooms to sell cars, right? They don't have the Elon free marketing move. What do you mean?
That's not the new world. The new world is you sell on the internet, and they tried that and it didn't work.
Tesla has showrooms, don't they?
Yes, no, Tesla has showrooms. Elon didn't want to have showrooms.
You can't sell a car that no one knows about until you get a chance to sit in it, right? So you went to a showroom and you sat in the car. You're telling a person on the internet
they wouldn't let me sit in the car, just to be clear.
Oh, okay. Well, you're telling a person on the internet to buy, like, you're skeptical. So first of all, I'm an engineer, which means I'm skeptical about everything. We were talking about YouTube strategies the other day, our team, and everything I hear, my first thought is, tell me why or prove it to me, right? So your skepticism, I think, is great. So, and the answer to that really is, let's see how long it takes Lucid to have factory tours. I'm supposed to get one when they're available. Again, we are in a pandemic and there's all kinds of other considerations, but they should do a factory tour. They should let everybody in and see it. And all the other points you make are addressable, meaning let's see if they'll do it, or let's have a chance to go and see the factories, which I think is key. I'm totally with you. I want to see the factory for myself. I want to see, like, for example, I mentioned the injection molded. They have this cool patent for this battery pack that's pretty slick and lower weight, not quite structural. It's a different approach to the same problem. I want to see that. I want to see what that looks like. I want to see the air. I want to see kind of a tear down of it, or the factory line, the paint shop. I want to see all of it. So I'm the same with you on that, right? I mean, you shouldn't. So invariably, you can't talk about Lucid, which is a shame, without the investing angle. So first and foremost, the comments are lively. Let's call it lively.
Yeah.
But I would say if you're doubtful, don't invest. Like, you should have your own opinions. Again, I'm really here to talk about kind of the engineering perspective. To your point about the leanness of the team, the last time I had checked, they were like 1,300 employees. That's a lean car company. That's not bloated by any means. And so to your point about, like, you were looking for flags, I look for flags about, is it legitimate? With Nikola, they had no expertise. They weren't building anything. Well, they kind of lied and they said they had this breakthrough battery that no one can believe. That kind of stuff, it's clearly hoo-ha. But here, they've kind of talked about their approach to how they solve stuff. By the way, there was a third party, I was just reading about this in preparation for this. A third party had done a wind tunnel drag coefficient assessment, and they gave the Lucid Air the rating that they claimed that they had, it's a really svelte.
No, and I agree with you. I don't know. I can't measure it myself, but I agree with you. It looks like it has a good drag
coefficient. It's a svelte, exactly.
But let me address this. There's a critical point here. So there is a claim that they sent the vehicle to a lab that is EPA certified, and the lab verified that the vehicle has 517 miles of range. And from the moment I saw that claim, I said, fine, let's see the report. Let's see the documents that the lab saw, so we can get verification that we can view it ourselves. Why hasn't Lucid? There's so many things Lucid. Here's the thing. You've got me claiming Lucid's a fraud, right? And the thing is, I'm the only voice calling this out. With Nikola, there were a lot of people that got suspicious.
No, you're not.
Really early.
No, you're not. The reason why I wanted to have this, we chatted about this. My Twitter is full of this. You're not alone at all. In fact,
I mean,
at this
YouTubers.
Point,
I mean YouTubers and media. Of YouTubers and media, I'm really the only one. I think I'm the only one, except maybe Gali recently picked apart their investor story at the investment slide deck, and he thought he saw problems in it, which we could talk about. But with because I think it's only me, I think it's actually a smart strategy for Lucid to ignore me, because it's really just Warren. He's got 40 at the time, 40,000 subscribers on YouTube. I'm approaching 50, but I'm still a small YouTuber. You've got all this positive media coverage. If they confront me, then they enlarge my story. They enlarge my criticism by confronting me. So they're ignoring me, and I think that's a smart PR strategy. Even if they're the good guys. Like, if I'm wrong, it's still smart on their part to ignore me because they have mostly positive press. I'm a trivial detail in their story. But if you are genuine, this is again, it's the I'll call it red flags because Gary Black was using the term red flags. So I'll say, where's the report? You claim that this certified lab, gave this report that verified your 517 miles of range. Release the report. Let people read it. What did that lab test? Because they can tell you we had a lab do this, and they had a quote from the guy at the lab. But where's the documents? Let us see, what did you test? Did it have maybe it had a 200 kilowatt hour pack in it? We don't know what they did to get the range they claim. That's, and so there's so many things they could do. But another point, just because I saw this comment and it really grabbed me. Someone said it's not fair for Warren to compare the Lucid to Tesla today. Warren should be comparing Lucid to Tesla in 2010. I think maybe 2011 would be closer. The problem is that, well, yeah, but then I should compare the Lucid Air to the Roadster, and they should be producing a vehicle that's as good as the Roadster and maybe the original Model S. The fact that they're claiming that today, if you're going to claim you're producing a vehicle that's better than Tesla today, then I have to compare you to Tesla today. If you were claiming we're producing a vehicle
there's two parts to it. There's the manufacturing of a car, and then there's the engineering of a car, right? Like you can be engineering complete, pencils down, I've got my car. Now the manufacturing engineers have to get that to be manufacturable. Those are kind of different situations. By the way, you mentioned about comparing them to 2010 Tesla. Yeah, I think that debate can be made. One thing I will say, I think I started talking about this. Tesla updated the Model S clearly in response to Lucid, right? If you look at the Model S Plaid and Plaid Plus, they literally saw the Laguna Seca lap that the Kilowatt, one of my friends, Ryan from the Kilowatts, he actually was there and he's like, holy crap, and then got some footage of and shared it, and it kind of blew up from there. But there was an air in wraps hitting a record lap around Laguna Seca. And so Tesla was on it. So first of all, what Tesla does is they go home and they say, we got to one-up them. We got to beat this. So I love that. That whole story to me is what I want. And that's why I want to see tons and tons of companies that have a shot. I think Nikola did irreparable damage. I think your assessment is my feeling as well. And the damage that they've done in terms of like trusting anybody else to rise from and to be able to do what Tesla did is unfortunate, because currently we have one example, Tesla. Rivian and Lucid, I think, are 2 and 3. I've always said those would be the three those would be the companies that really, like the American companies that bring EVs to the market. Rivian doesn't step on Tesla's toes at all, which has been a smart move for them. They don't have any of this hate. Nobody's hating on Rivian. They've delayed.
Yeah, I agree.
They've had all the same problems, right? But because it's hard to make cars. But what they were smart is they're not saying compare directly to anything from Tesla. In fact, their cars ranges, their efficiencies are very low because they're not aerodynamic at all. The R1T and the R1S both need really big battery packs in order to get any kind of a range out of them.
Yeah, they're really more off-road vehicles, right? They're really more off-road vehicles.
Yeah. But to your point, I will say, and this is a criticism of Lucid, maybe Lucid's watching, what I loved about Rivian was the long way up. Remember, they wanted to do the electric motorcycle race. So they go to Rivian, they kind of shop this around and say, we want to even have our film crews be in electric trucks. Could you do that? And they're thinking, we have like a pre-production model. We don't even have anything for you. But you know what? We're going to get 2 cars, VIN number 001 and 002. They're not even going to have full consoles. There's going to be like big levers and stuff in the center console. But we're going to get you trucks, ship them to Patagonia, and you're going to drive them. Oh, and we'll build adventure charging networks along the way, because in South America, it's pretty sparse. That, to me, is why I love Rivian. That whole story, they let it be, right? If you remember in that story, they wanted, in the very first version, they wanted to use KTM motorcycles. And KTM said, we don't think you can go a long way around the world. And they backed out. And Charlie Borman was so pissed. He was cursing their name. And they went to BMWs, and BMWs have been all smart marketing moves. So I think what Lucid should do is something similar here. I think they need to just get this car. They've had the Apple approach. They're trying to appeal to the $100,000 buyer who has different likes and interests. I get all that. But I think at this point, what would really make sense for them is to do that Rivian thing. They need to have like a grassroots marketing move. They need to have people driving this car, doing something cool to show this thing off, because they get a lot of hate, to my mind, compared to Rivian, and they're in similar situations as well. And also, Rivian, in a way, has less focus. They have this van, this delivery parcel truck with Amazon going on, and they have all this other stuff. Lucid, again, they're just focusing on building one car. So that's kind of, to me, kind of the difference. So I think in terms of their marketing, and even still, I think they have, their marketing is kind of traditional. If you look at their Twitter post, it's like a very manicured shot, beautiful. They have great designers and artists, like even you. I think we've talked about this before. Masterful photographers. Their marketing material, their color schemes, their everything about what they're doing is great.
They have the best PDFs in the industry.
But what you need to do on Twitter,
they have the best. Their PDF designers are the best in the industry. I'll give them that.
That's okay. But what they need to do now is get more of a grassroots movement. That's what Tesla does. Part of why Tesla's been successful is their fans. A lot of them are in this chat right now, selling cars, referring cars. I've done that. A lot of people have bought Teslas from my getting the car and driving it around and my experience with it, and my kids and our whole adventure with it. So that is, I think, what comes next. I think hopefully they're listening. You know, I do get a chance to meet with them at some point. I should be having a factory tour. I can bring all this up. In fact, all your feedback about seeing everything, I'm 100% with you. I can't wait to see the factory. I want to see what they're doing. And, you know, hopefully that happens in the near term. And, you know, this vaccine gets around and some kind of a normalcy is restored in life. But I'm seeing a bunch of messages deleted. Is that you?
Somebody tweeted this, did the same message 10 times.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So here, a couple of things here. First of all, what you mentioned Nikola and the damage to the EV industry. And for people wondering why I'm angry, it's not because I'm a Tesla fan and I'm mad about the competition. I want to address this key point. I think you and I actually agree on this. Lucid Air is not really competition for Tesla because the price is so much higher. And I agree with you on this as well, the Model S and the Model X are not important vehicles for Tesla's future. The Tesla's future is the Model 3, the Model Y, and the future compact and the Cybertruck selling in so much higher volumes than the Model S and the X. And the Model S and the X are sort of like halo cars for Tesla. You know, the Model X delivering astronauts to the rocket, right? That's a big ad for Tesla. If the Model S Plaid comes out and it does 0 to 60 in under 2 seconds, that's a halo car. It's actually a halo car for the whole EV industry to say, look, we can do this. We can deliver amazing vehicles with electricity. So I think that, and my concern about Lucid, the reason that Lucid makes me, there's two things about Lucid that make me mad. And the first one was from before, and the second one is new. The first one is, I'm concerned that when the fraud becomes unveiled, because again, I believe it's an elaborate fraud. When the fraud becomes unveiled, it damages the EV industry the same way that Nikola damages the EV industry. And it's actually a bigger damage because so many people like you bought the fraud. And I don't blame you for buying the fraud. I think I'm the outlier. And let's be clear, I could be wrong. I accept that I might be. I don't think I'm wrong. I'm confident I'm right, but we can all be wrong. But it's very hard for people once they've been fooled to accept that they've been fooled, and they don't want to see the problems. So, and the other thing I just want to say, I agree with you. It was interesting the timing of the Model S refresh when the Air was coming out, but the Model X was also refreshed, and there'd been a long time call by people that they need to refresh the Model S and the Model X. And what really happened was they finally got to the point where they had improved battery chemistry for the 1865. They finally got to the point where the improvements they've been planning all along for Model S were ready. They didn't just suddenly refresh the Model S because of Lucid. They were working all along with an engineering team to say, how can we get the Model S to be better than it is? And they got to that point. And it so happened to coincide with timing. And Elon definitely played it up by dropping the price of the Model S before the refresh. He dropped the price of the Model S long range to like $69,420, which undercut the price that Lucid had just announced for the Air, for the Air Pure. So I think there was a little bit of gaming there, but that's not the reason they refreshed the Model S and the Model X. They refreshed the Model S and the Model X because it was time and because they had done the work. That's just to be clear about that. So, well,
I mean, you can say that, right? That could be the reason.
But you don't really think they did the engineering work in 6 months to refresh the Model S and the X, do you?
No, I mean, I think there was work to be done, but I think their benchmark, what they wanted to hit as targets, was inspired by that, right? And
but they went way beyond Lucid's target, right? Lucid is 2.5 seconds 0 to 60. They went sub 2. They went sub 2 second on the 0 to 60 time on both the Tesla Model S Plaid and the Plaid Plus. They're both sub 2 second.
The Air numbers.
It's 1.99 seconds. It's 1.99. I think they actually tested the current Plaid, not the Plaid Plus, and the current Plaid. They actually got got 1.96 seconds 0 to 60 time. And then the Plaid Plus Plus is going to be faster. Who knows how fast this? I think there's sort of like a practical limit of like 1.9 seconds before the tires just can't deliver the acceleration to the pavement. They just lose traction if you try to go too fast. But no, and so here's a comment. Guess Warren got really hurt by Lucid, and that's why he's by Nicole, and that's why he's hard on Lucid now. I actually never cared that much about Nicole. I never took them seriously in the first place. I actually think that's why I think Nikola did less damage to the EV industry, because I don't think that many people took Nikola seriously, because Trevor Milton was such a loser that it was easy to disbelieve them from the beginning. Where with Lucid, I wanted to believe in Lucid until September reveal. I wanted to, even when I did my video about it, I wanted them to prove me wrong. And they have done nothing to. Let's see. The 517-mile range was validated by reputable German engineering consultant FEV North America Inc. Tested the air at a lab in Auburn Hills, Michigan, under US EPA. So Frank Hunt said that. Frank, I agree with you that story is out. My concern is, where's the report? We don't know what was tested. We don't know what was tested, what that lab test. I agree that that's there, and there was actually a quote from the guy who runs that lab that yes, it met the range, whatever. It was a fairly brief quote, but he supported the claim. But we don't know what was tested. Why don't they release that report? Why don't they let a journalist drive the car? Where is all of that?
I'm with you on that. So I can probably save a little bit of time and just say all of your points about like transparency. I think in the world today, in the culture of, this is a burgeoning new industry, which means you're going to have a lot of players. You're going to have a lot of growth. Some are going to be really big stars. You're going to have other Nikola type stuff. Transparency really is the name of the game. I think I can probably summarize what you're saying pretty much by saying everything about their claims, or if they're going to say something and they're close to production, open up, let people drive it, show the reports, right? I think I'm with you on that. I think we can say that's probably a good move for them to do, because that way we could get this, we can have an answer to this one way or the other. Well, I also wanted to kind of touch base with you a little bit, Warren. You mentioned about, I want to kind of go back to the part about the engineering side. This is actually an interview that I read with Peter that got me thinking about this. So you mentioned, how can they have better engineers than Tesla? So first, this is the idea of the first mover's advantage, which is what Tesla had. So Tesla was the first to do this. And the advantages were their name is synonymous with everything technology, right? When you're the first, you're the golden child that way. But they had tons of issues. For one, the charging infrastructure. They had to build out a supercharger network instead of working on their car or the 3 or anything else, right? So they had to devote engineering man hours, resources to city planning and getting permits to build. And these superchargers can easily cost $500,000 each. They have thousands of them now. So that was a huge CapEx spend that the second mover will not have, which is Lucid Motors and Rivian. Rivian's building an adventure network, but that's just to kind of supplant their extra charging that they'll have automatically. Electrify America is what Lucid is going with, which means their engineers are working on the car. They're not worried about the charging infrastructure.
You heard what Gali said about Electrify America, right?
So I don't have to because I've driven the Mach-E and I had to go use it. And again, this is one data point. What I'm probably going to do is rent one of these cars and do a long road trip to just hit 10 or 20 of them. But I went to one in San Diego here at Fashion Valley Mall, and half of them didn't work. The other half, I plugged into one of them, and I got a Windows 7 embedded edition crash.
I saw that video.
I saw that video. Yeah. I was thinking to myself, I'm a software engineer. I'm pretty picky about stuff. And I was just thinking, Electrify America has a long way to go. But here's the thing. They do nothing but this. So do I think Electrify America is going to get pretty good next year, better and better? Of course they are, right? And there's also Blink and ChargePoint, and there's others as well. So
why would what's the incentive? Electrify America, for people who don't know, is pretty much owned by Volkswagen, right?
Yeah.
What incentive do they have to get better? Why would they care? How many people were at the charging station when you were there?
When I was there, nobody else was there.
Okay, so there's no demand for the service they're providing. Why would they bother getting better if there's nobody wants it in the first place? Well, no Teslas are pulling in, and there's no other. This is the competition is coming argument, right? That there's all these electric vehicles that are coming. They're going to compete with Tesla. Where are they? They've been saying the competition is coming for years, and the competition still isn't here. Like the Mustang Mach-E, you drove the Mustang Mach-E. I think you would agree with me. The Mustang Mach-E is a nice car.
Yeah,
right.
It is.
We don't know how much it costs to produce the Mach-E. We don't know whether they can make it.
You
at
want to
scale.
talk about that after this, right? We can do that.
Yeah.
We should talk about that
Sure.
next. Yeah.
But you know, the argument that that Volkswagen will make the electrifying network better, we don't know that. We know that Volkswagen is playing games and they're selling cars to their own dealers to fake numbers, and we know they faked diesel emissions numbers before. We don't know that network.
Well,
is
we
gonna
have
get
Blink,
better.
we have ChargePoint, right? We have others as well, right? EVgo.
Okay.
So these are all networks. So they do nothing but invest in that. So they're going to get better. Tesla, kind of the Apple move, they have their own proprietary port, and they don't sell a CCS charging adapter in the US, which kind of irritates me, because there was one time I was on a trip where that would have really come in handy. So far, just once, but it would have come in handy, and I didn't have it. So the second mover advantage, though, is part of the story here. They are able to just focus on the business of building a car. And in the interview that I saw today, Peter Rawlinson kind of alluded to, and this is something we haven't talked about yet, which is the self-driving tech. And Lucid is teaming up with a company for their self-driving tech. So they have this hardware stack that's pretty comparable to what people have with.
Who?
What?
Who are they teaming up with?
They haven't announced who it is, I don't think yet. I don't know who it is yet.
Is that the video where he hinted that it was Apple?
Yeah, I think
He
it
said
was.
a big,
I don't know where people got
company.
Apple from. That's not what I thought, but something like that. But the point is, what he said is that he doesn't think that Lucid can afford to invest in that right now. They need to get good at building EVs. Again, that's the focus. Like,
don't you think that's different from the story they told before, that they had their software in house and they were going to have it? That they were vertically integrated and were doing the software in house, and then all of a sudden they were using Alexa. Like, wait, are you in house or are you not in house?
Well, so there's different levels to it too. Like there's like lane keep, or ADAS, which is advanced driver assistance, where it keeps you in your lane, kind of autopilot, versus full self-driving. Right? You could tackle that in different ways. So the one thing here too, and I had a little debate with this. I'm curious about the people in the comment section as well. Tesla's going on their own way, which means they're 500,000 to 1 million cars they have on the road are aggregating data and feeding their machine learning models. They have Dojo, and they're going to make their self-driving better. So I think what will happen is other companies are going to partner up with companies like Mobileye. We talked about Mobileye as a company that has a computer vision machine learning model for self-driving. Comma.ai is kind of more of an open source, little cool company. They're based here in San Diego, and I think their founder is
I love Comma.ai.
Yeah, I do too. I really
love
like George
Oates.
Hotz. I do too. Yeah. And there's some others as well. And there might be some new emerging companies that come out of this. So one of the articles that I was reading was about Microsoft. They have this machine learning self-driving car aspect with their Azure cloud computing services. And as this becomes big business, more and more tech companies are going to get into this. And so what ends up happening is, what if Rivian and Lucid or VW or Chevy Bolt, what if other companies are all aggregating their data with another service? The number of cars on the road advantage that Tesla has today could shift. So what I'm saying is, the vertical integration that Tesla has is great, but there are some exceptions to that. Sometimes vertical integration can bite you. An example of that comes to mind is Intel. If you've been following the kind of the Silicon Wars lately, AMD is kind of getting their lunch. And the reason why is AMD doesn't have any manufacturing presence. They outsource to Global Foundry and TSMC. So when they come up and say, hey, we could do a 7 nanometer process at 10 billion units per year, AMD goes, great, let's do it, and they're in business. Right. Whereas Intel's carrying the luggage of this, what used to be their advantage. Like, Intel was king of the hill, but now they haven't quite cracked 7 nanometers. They're not getting yields that they need, and so now they're stuck with that, right? And so they're losing out to that. So the game is long, and I love Tesla. I think Tesla is uniquely poised to do a lot of things well, but there's some interesting moves in the future that I think will pit kind of Tesla versus all kind of a scenario, and I'm kind of curious how that'll play out.
Okay,
and
so
also,
let me go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
So I wanted to head to something else and then move over to some. I wanted to talk about one brief thing related to this, where I think we can sort of close out, because we don't agree. But a key point, one of the things that I mentioned in my latest video, is when you go through the slide deck, they have this sort of, I'll call it a 5-year projection of where they're going to be. And 2025, I think, is a year, or maybe it was 2024, they're projecting 90,000 vehicles delivered with an average selling price that works out to $110,000 a vehicle. And I don't think we don't need to debate this, because I think you said this isn't really something you really want to argue about. I don't think the market is big enough for that. That the market for $100,000 plus cars is big enough to succeed and deliver 90,000 cars, and then the next year is 135,000 cars at $100,000 a vehicle. I think those are unattainable numbers. But so here's where I want to take that. I suggested before this happened that they would not deliver cars in the spring, and they didn't deliver cars in the spring. So I said something, I was right, and the Lucid lovers won't give me credit for calling something correctly. They're like, well, delays happen all the time. Okay, but I called it. They were insistent they were going to do it right up until the very last minute. So here's another way of looking at it, that we can't resolve the dispute now, but we could conceivably agree that we could resolve this dispute later by asking this question: what benchmark do they have to achieve? Let's say by the end of 2021. I mean, they haven't really committed to delivering any vehicles before the end of 2021, right? But they did commit to, in their slide deck, they would deliver 577 vehicles this year. And I don't think we should push this out to 2022. So is there a number of vehicles you think they need to deliver in order to persuade that you think should be enough to persuade Warren that they're credible? Because my number is 577. You lied the last time. I think they're lying. If you're going to show me, then you got to show me the 577. And I'll say this: I don't think they will deliver 100 vehicles before the end of the year. Would you agree with me that if they don't deliver 100 vehicles before the end of the year, that they haven't lived up to their claims again? Or is there some standard you would hold them to, some date and some number that you would hold them to, that you would say at this point, you know what, you guys haven't delivered, I don't believe in you anymore? What would it take to persuade you? What numbers do they have to fail to achieve for you to say, you know what, I don't think these guys are for real anymore?
Yeah, great question. I think I'm pretty much in agreement with what you're saying. From what I've read and what I've seen, they've mentioned that they have production units coming off the line, meaning, again, there's still a whole validation process. Like, again, can't underemphasize how hard this is. It's basically the most crazy thing in the world to try to do. You'd have to be nuts to build cars. The only thing nuttier would be building airplanes, which, again, there's a reason why there's only 2 companies doing it, pretty much, or a couple. So it's a crazy thing to do, and they're saying that they're rolling cars out and doing stuff with it, which for me means you should have deliveries in 2021. So you mentioned, I think 500 units this year.
They claim 500. They claim 577. I'm saying
577.
I believe they will not deliver. Here's what I really believe. I believe they won't deliver a single car in 2021. So, but I think a fair threshold is to say, I am confident they will not deliver 100 cars before the end of 2020.
Yeah,
is there a number that you would demand they deliver before the end of 21 before you will say, okay, they really aren't delivering what they said?
Right now, I would say I want to see the 577. And the reason I say it is because, like, this is the way manufacturing works. If you're going to get to 100, you're probably going to get to 500. It's kind of an all or nothing thing. Once you've got the line rolling, there could be shortages that we have. It's
literally deliveries to customers, by the way. It's not just production, it's deliveries. But I would say this: look, if they delivered 500, close enough, right? Yeah. People who claim that Tesla's 49,000 or 499,000, 500 and whatever, that wasn't really 500,000. That's a silly claim. If they make it 500, obviously Warren's wrong. So here's another benchmark I'm going to ask you to hold them to. Let's say we're not going to hold them to 517 miles of range. Let's say we're not even going to hold them to 500 miles of range. Would you agree with it? They don't deliver 400 miles of range, that they failed to deliver what they claimed? Is there a number you would expect them to deliver before if they don't achieve this number, then they lied to us?
So that's my next video that I'm doing is the truth about electric vehicle range figures, because I have never gotten the range figure for my Model 3 Performance ever. And let me be clear. I'm not talking about your range experience. I'm talking about the EPA range, because they claim, this is one of the things, they claim that they got an EPA certified lab to verify 517 miles range. And I'm not asking them to demonstrate I'm not saying the benchmark you should hold them to is 517, but is there a number, if they fall below it, you're going to say, you know what, they didn't deliver what they said? I would kind of flip it around a little bit. The EPA is not a hard hit. It's not a hard measure to win. Like I mentioned before, what people don't understand about the EPA works is they think that there's like this, hardcore guy in the lab coat who's got this thing and he tests it. that you give them a number. You tell them, like the Tesla will say, hey, EPA, our new Model S has this is the range figure. And they'll pretty much say, okay, that's good. And there's a lot of room for interpretation and the test numbers and stuff. So my point is the EPA figure to me is not even that. I'm not even, if let's say the EPA came out and said,
that's the number there. But wait. That's the number they're claiming. They're not claiming we're going to achieve real world range. They claim they're going to achieve 570 miles EPA range. So that's a somewhat objective standard that we can hold them to.
Sure. I think I personally, from again just looking at how they're building these cars, I think the numbers are achievable. You mentioned this. You mentioned that you don't think they're going to hit the numbers. So are you talking about performance and also the range, or
listen, I'm just going with range.
Range.
I'm not really. I actually don't care that much about 0 to 60 times. I don't care about, but this range claim is the big claim, right? If they do a 3-second 0 to 60, who cares? If they do a 4-second 0 to 60, I don't really care. I mean, that would be underperforming, right? But okay, who cares? I really don't care about that. People are buying a luxury car.
For you, it's the range number.
I just think that range number, that's a big number that they claim, 517 miles. And I'm not saying they need to make it. I'm not even saying they need to make 500 to be credible. I don't think they're going to make 400, but I'm just asking you on EPA. And I know you don't like the EPA rating and using it, but that's the number they claimed. I'm just asking you, if they come out with a 350-mile EPA range, are you going to say, okay, you didn't deliver? What's the number that they would have to meet before you would say close enough?
Sure. So again, the kind of the back of the napkin calculation is they're projecting about a 4.4 miles per kilowatt hour at a 117 kilowatt hour battery pack to get that 517 miles of range. So even if they did 4.1, which is what that Bolt that I drove in Los Angeles traffic got, that puts them at 480 miles of range. I'd say they're going to be at least at 4.1 miles per kilowatt hour.
So if they deliver less than 480 miles of range, you would agree with me they haven't delivered what they said. EPA. And I would even say let's say 450. If they don't deliver 450 miles of range, EPA rating range, would you agree with me they haven't met their what they claimed?
Yeah, 450 puts them at 3.85, which is really low. That's, I mean,
okay. So just to be clear, if they make 450, I will concede they did something special.
Okay.
It may not be all they claim, but I would concede that that's something special. If they don't make 450, I think you're agreeing with me they haven't delivered what they said.
Sure. Yeah.
So we got two data points. They got to deliver 100 cars by the end of the year, and they got to deliver 450 miles of range. I just wanted to sort of wrap this up.
Yeah.
We could argue endlessly about this, and I wanted to move on to something happier.
Yeah, and also we should do this again at the end of the year. We should have cocktails though, and we should do this again.
Yes.
I'm glad we're switching gears a little bit. The comments are incredibly intense, and I personally have never understood that. I don't know why there's people who want to see Lucid fail, and I don't understand that, right? If you don't like the car or you don't think they're going to do it, fine. You don't buy their stock, don't invest in them. Yeah. But to like
thank you, John.
Cheer for them to fail is a bizarre sentiment, which I don't get. Because what I want to see is competition. Like right now, for example, and especially in California, Teslas, I got attention in my Bolt. I had the Bolt EUV, and there were gentlemen like rolling their window down on the freeway and waving at me in a Bolt, right? In my Tesla, no one cares. You know why? Because everyone has a Tesla where I live. Everyone. Right. Every neighbor has a Tesla. And so at this point, we have 4 car models, the 3, the X, the Y, and the X, or whatever, right? The 4 models, and 5 colors. Do the math. That's how many options of car we have. We can't live in a world like that. We need competition. We need companies to thrive. And so what I'm saying is I want to see Lucid succeed. First of all, again, subjectively, I love that car. The look of that car has always just struck me as gorgeous. And now watching their information and what they're doing, I like what I'm seeing. Again, the focus. I can't underemphasize that enough. This isn't like 20 car models and 50 things that they're doing. No, they're building one car. They have one factory. They're doing this thing. Here's how they're going to do it. I love the focus. For me, the check boxes of what I'm looking for are met. Now we should get together and we'll do a debrief and we'll see who's right.
But I want to agree with you on something. I have said all along. I have said this. I want Lucid to prove me wrong.
I remember.
I want them to. I agree with you. We want more EV makers. Because let's say they're going to take out the Mercedes S-Class and the BMW 7 Series, and we're going
Right.
which are big fossil fuel users.
Yeah.
They emit a lot of pollutants. There's diesel versions that emit particulate matter. I want them to take. I'm an Audi fan, right? And I want them to take out the Audi A6. You know, I want them to succeed. I want to see more EVs. And people who say, "Oh, Warren doesn't like Lucid because they're competition," they're not competition. They're not in the same space. At some point, maybe they'll become competition. But in the slide deck, you go 5 years out, they're going to be producing 250,000 cars in 2026. At that point, Tesla will be producing 6 million cars or more. That's not competition, and there's plenty of room. We're trying to get rid of 2 billion internal combustion engine vehicles.
Right.
And if Tesla's producing 6 million and you're producing 250,000, we're barely making a dent. We need more EV makers.
Right.
And I wanted to turn this to, I watched your video about the Ford Mustang. We're gonna move on from this conversation about Lucid. I want to move on to, I want to recommend to people. Yes.
Can I just say one thing real quick?
Yes, sure.
My wife just pointed out, all of you guys watching right now, by the way, 800 of you are watching, super cool. Hit that like button, help Warren out, make sure this video gets disseminated across the inner tubes and of YouTube. And thank you guys for watching. I think it's time for us to move on, yeah?
So yes, I saw your video about the Mustang Mach-E. If you check out Ricky's channel, he just recently did a video with the Mustang Mach-E. And I want to say, you know, I should be upset about if I hated Lucid because I'm a Tesla fan, then why don't I hate the Mustang Mach-E? I think the Mustang Mach-E, from everything I've seen, there are two EVs that I think are the most credible contenders for the best EVs that aren't Tesla. And it's the Mustang Mach-E and the Porsche Taycan. And you like the Porsche Taycan, right? It's a very high-end vehicle. It's very expensive. A lot of people can't afford it. The Mach-E is much more affordable. It's pretty much a direct competitor to the Model Y. My take on it is, it doesn't matter how you compete with Tesla. It matters how you compete with internal combustion engine vehicles. And I just wanted to give you a chance to say what you liked about the Mach-E, and just want to encourage people to get the full story. Check out Ricky's channel, 2-Bit Da Vinci, and watch his video on the Mustang Mach-E, because I thought it was a great video. What did you think of it?
Yeah, I appreciate that. You know, we have 2 kids, so at the end of the day, all of us fitting into a car is at the core of our decision-making process. We have reviewed the third row Model Y, which is probably at the forefront of what we're thinking about pulling the trigger on. I have a reservation, but I'm holding off until, you know, I did the Mach-E, but the Mach-E to me was probably the best looking crossover EV in that space. The Model Y is nice. I think the Model 3 is a better looking car. The Y, just the proportions when you kind of extrude them, it's a beautiful car. I love the Model Y. The Mach-E might be even better looking. There's a couple of compromises though. For one, there's in the Model Y, there was a really deep where like the spare wheel would go in the back, because EVs historically don't come with spare wheels, lose out all that weight. But in the Model Y, that area is cavernous. It is like 1.5 feet, and it is massive. And you open that door, and you can put like an entire airline luggage piece down there. You can put a stroller, all kinds of stuff. The Ford doesn't have that. So in the back, the door, if you open it, really it's just like a flat tire kit and like the battery charger. So that's all gone. And that really matters because both cars have a very fastback roofline, which is good for aerodynamics and longer range. So as a result, taller cargo doesn't fit that well back there. You factor in the rear seat, and so that space is kind of hindered. So that's why I love the Model Y. And even in the third row Model Y, the room behind it, because of that door, is incredible. Like the packaging design, you can just tell Tesla's iterated on this. They've learned so much. The car is brilliant. Also, the frunk in the Mach-E is actually pretty big and roomy. And honestly, for us, I think it could work. My biggest gripe about the car, I also don't think it's as fast as like a all-wheel drive Model Y. I don't. I know you don't care about that, but I kind of do. I have a Performance 3. I do like. I used to be into cars before electric cars as well. But the problem I had, the biggest issue, and I think they can address this over software, was the pedal feel. So the accelerator and the brake pedal, both the programming in it, because the brake is actually a linkage, I believe. It's not fly-by-wire, but the accelerator pedal is fly-by-wire, meaning it's a joystick. You move a pedal, and a computer takes that input and does what it will with it. The problem with it was in the first 10-15%, it was really herky-jerky. It felt like there were cogs, or there was it felt like a transmission, an automatic transmission kind of finding a gear kind of a thing. And it was unfortunate because it was really tough in like stop and go traffic to deal with. I do again think that could be solved with software. I think it's just a programming thing. In comparison, my Model 3 performance is pretty much perfection. You could just throttle that accelerator pedal and it's just perfectly programmed. The brake also was kind of the same thing where you touch it and it grabs really hard. It's not linear. It felt like it grabs really hard and then the feedback kind of dials down. So the first 15-20% on both pedals irritated me. And if you live in a city with traffic, that'll irritate you for sure. We got tons of attention in the car. Everywhere we went to like a Starbucks and to an In-N-Out. Everybody was rolling their windows down and like honking their horns, and we got it in red, so it was very flashy. Overall, I thought it was a really good SUV. It had really good shoulder room, and you have 2 car seats into it. So we tested that kind of stuff. And for a third passenger, even with our 2 kids, it would work. It ticks all the right boxes for us. The charging at home, it comes with a NEMA 1450 adapter and a charge cable. So literally, I would unplug my Tesla cable and plug this in and charge it. That was easy. Electrify America was a sticking point. I did not have a good experience with Electrify America, and to the point where I need to do an entire long drive somewhere and put it through its paces. Because again, this is just one data point, but wasn't really that thrilled with Electrify America, and I hope they do kind of improve. But what about you? Have you driven one yet?
No, I sat in a Mustang Mach-E and I mentioned Blake Fuller earlier in this conversation. Blake Fuller, for those who don't know, drove the Performance Model 3 in the Pikes Peak Challenge and won the Pikes Peak Challenge. And I went to Sebring International Raceway and watched him drive the Mustang Mach-E. And I talked to him about it. Actually, he had already been driving it, and I talked to him about it. And he said it's the best Ford he's ever driven. And that comes to a point. You did something that I think a lot of people do when they look at a new EV. It's always compared to the Tesla. And I don't mean this to be offensive to you. This is just a concern I have whenever almost every video I see where somebody's trying out a new EV, they compare it to a Tesla. And I think it's the wrong comparison. The comparison that people should make is, how does this compare to the closest internal combustion engine vehicle? How does it compare to the Ford Escape or the Ford Explorer? How does it compare to, what's the Toyota Highlander is probably the leading internal combustion engine vehicle in the field, or the RAV4. How does it compare to that vehicle? And going on what Blake Fuller said, this is the best Ford he's ever driven. That means it's better than internal combustion engine vehicles he's driven. And if that's the case, then Tesla doesn't make enough vehicles, right? We need people to buy more vehicles. So if you can't get a Model Y, right? If the demand surges for the Model Y and they can't make enough Model Ys, and we want them to sway more Highlander buyers. We want more EVs to come along and do that. And I think the Mach-E, and I guess I'll ask you this question: do you think it's good enough to do that? Is it good enough to sway ICE vehicle buyers to say, you know what, I don't feel comfortable with the Tesla brand, but I trust Ford. I'm going to get the Ford Mustang Mach-E. Do you think it's good enough for that?
I totally agree. You mentioned the Highlander, which is the next kind of size up. It has a third row. It's kind of the Honda Pilot, the Highlander, that class. Yeah. So this is a step down from that. This would be the CR-V, the Honda, the Toyota RAV4 class. Yeah. And 100%, I think it could. I think it'll come down to, and I agree with you on the point about the comparison to Tesla, but you have to remember that the car is pricey. The car that I drove, I think it was like $55,000. And here in San Diego, which this is what drives me crazy about the legacy automakers, the guy had to pay a $5,000 markup to get it. And he negotiated that down from $10,000. They wanted $10,000 over MSRP. Anyway, right. So the RAV4 does not cost that much. You can get the RAV4 fully equipped for $35,000 or so. And you can get a base model for $25,000 or so. So that price dilemma is the problem. So we're not at the price parity. And for Ford, you've mentioned this, and I think you're going to bring this up. You wonder, what does it cost Ford to make this car? How affordable could it get? This is, again, where Tesla shines with understanding the battery supply and building their own and all that kind of stuff. But if you just look at the car to car, like a RAV4, if you're looking for a RAV4 or a Mach-E, get the Mach-E. It's way faster. It's way funner. You can charge it at home. It costs nothing to charge. It's way more economic and affordable. 100% you can compete today. And the Mach-E gets pretty good range as well. For the average person, I see no reason why you couldn't have that as your everyday EV.
And I would say my experience in the Mustang Mach-E, I only sat in it briefly, but I thought it was a really, really nice interior. Like, maybe it compares to like a Lexus RX 350 or whatever the Lexus RX is, which would be a more expensive vehicle and be a closer comparison. Does it? I have a family member who has one. I don't know that I've been in it. I think I have been in it. Is that maybe a fair argument or not really? Is it?
Yeah,
Do you think? I mean, is it fair that it's really more of a competitor with Lexus RX than it is to a Toyota RAV4?
yeah, it has the perforated leather seats and it's heated steering wheel, and it has premium stuff, and it has that big portrait screen, which I'd rather see at landscape. But yeah, that's a fair point. Maybe either a highly trimmed RAV4 or like the Lexus equivalent, or I think Acura has the RDX, that kind of a class of car. Yeah, when you talk about it like that, they're more equivalent in terms of price, and still the RAV4 is going to outperform it in terms of performance and stuff, and just be more economic to operate. So
yeah, and I just on that point, I drive. For those who don't know, I don't own a Tesla yet. I'm waiting on my Cybertruck. I might get a Model Y or persuade my wife to get a Model Y. I drive a Volkswagen Passat. It's a very convenient, very inexpensive vehicle. I got it for $18,000 brand new, which is amazing. But I was driving it today. I went on a long drive. I went down to Fort Lauderdale. I had an errand to run, and then I had to kill some time, whatever. And I'm driving around, and I realized how much I really want self-driving. I at least want autopilot. I have FSD ordered on the Cybertruck. I've realized, number one, I'm a human driver. I think human drivers are terrible. And I think we need to get to the point where the cars are driving us. And I think that we don't think about the hassles of owning a gasoline car. We're just used to it. We accept it. But, every time I go to a gas station now, because I know so much about Tesla, every time I go to a gas station, I feel like an idiot. Every time I have to get an oil change, I feel like an idiot. There's all these things we have to do when you have a gasoline car. Imagine when you need a new muffler. Well, there's no muffler on an EV. Just there's so many, the transmission fluid, right? You got to get your transmission fluid. There's all these service things you need in an ICE car, and it's all like with an EV. I mean, you have a Tesla. How many times have you had your oil changed? Right? What's the maintenance like on your Tesla?
20,000 miles. I've paid $30 as an experiment to see how the service was on the app. I called them to come and rotate my tires, and for $30, somebody showed up, did all the work, and left. And I just waited.
And how many times have you sat in an oil change place waiting 3 hours for them to finish the oil change on your car?
Back in the day,
right?
Yeah, terrible.
No. I mean, now that you have a Tesla, you haven't had.
Oh yeah, now none.
Every time I get my oil change, there's 3 hours gone, right? Because it should only take a half hour, but then you got to drop it off, and then it's going to be a while. There's other cars ahead of you. Ideally it would be a drive-through, boom, boom, it's done. It's not. So I think that's a huge thing. So let me.
There's one more thing on this. In the same vein, I was debating with somebody who complains about how long it takes to charge EVs, and I asked him, like, where do you pump gas, and he pumps at Costco. Here in California, if you pump gas at Costco, I mean, they'll save you like 10 or 15 cents per gallon. There's huge lines, so the average person is waiting in line for 20 minutes to get to the pump, to then pump for 5 minutes, and then drive back home. All in, I think you'd be way better off just going to a supercharger or like a destination like Target supercharger, charge while you're grocery shopping, and go home.
Or you just charge at home.
Or charge at home. That's what I do.
You charge at home. You never go to a gas station unless you're on a long drive. And then you stop at a supercharger station, which is much nicer than a gas station. So I think it's huge. I think there's huge advantages. But I think we should probably wrap up fairly soon. And I just wanted to ask you this question. This is more like a broader question. What are you excited about right now? What are you excited about in the world? I'm excited about SpaceX. I'm excited about Neuralink. I'm excited about the Boring Company. You might be excited about the same things, but give me something that you're excited about. Let's leave us on a really big positive note.
Yeah. So I love what SpaceX is doing, and bringing launch capabilities back to the U.S., which kind of was an embarrassment that we didn't have that for that period of time when we didn't. So I'm really in love with what SpaceX is doing. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and when they were doing some of these the Starship tests and stuff, my son and I are watching this, and when they did the orbit back in May, he's like excited about space, and it kind of feels like a rebirth. So SpaceX for sure, and just NASA and what they've done with Mars and Perseverance and stuff is super exciting. Neuralink you mentioned, and I remember your video. You talked about your family history, which I didn't know about. Clearly, why you're excited about Neuralink. Neuralink is the great unknown for me. I'm so excited about it as an engineer, as a scientist. There's so many, it's like kind of worms, and how a future where we have brain implants can look. Imagine like malware. You have the wrong thought and you got this virus, and So
Yeah.
it's just a funny thing to think about. But more than anything, being in tech, there's so much capital available. I joke about this. I have two friends that will call me like, "Hey, you have an idea? We want to." They're asking me to give me money, and this happens all the time, especially if you're in software. Anybody who's a software engineer in the audience will relate to this. But there is capital and excitement to build great stuff, and that is why we've had this burgeoning last couple of this last decade and going forward. So there's excitement and money and capital available. So any great new idea in the audience, if you've got an amazing idea for something new, pitch it, get it funded, try it out, build it. And what more could you be excited about than that? And to know that my kids are growing up with that as their future, as much as there is some stuff that sucks, we love EVs for a reason. We love Earth. We want to see Earth thrive. But I think there's a lot to be excited about. And that's kind of what I like to talk about on my channel is with all the craziness, you should be optimistic because I think the future is going to be bright.
Yeah, no, and I guess I would say kind of along the lines you're saying, I'm in this community on the Clubhouse app where we talk about Tesla stuff. And we actually, I don't remember who coined it, but I actually have a t-shirt with this. We coined the term Teslanaire. There's a group of us who invested in Tesla fairly early and I invested fairly heavily. And basically a group of people have become Teslanaires, millionaires because of Tesla. And I feel like, there's a question that somebody makes there's some people like Jason DeBolt who made I don't know, he's like $12 million because of his Tesla stock investment. There's another guy, one of the guys that was at Sebring International Racing with, I think he has like $30 million in Tesla stock. He was a Tesla employee and he got to buy it, really cheap, really early, like 7 years ago, paid maybe $5 a share post split, and has so, and you get to this point where you have so much money, you're like, well, what do I do now? Why would you keep working? And they both retired from their jobs. It's like, well, so I really feel like what I'm excited about is there's this group of people who are now free to what I would say, be like Elon. If you remember when Michael Jordan was playing basketball, they had this commercial with Gatorade, be like Mike.
I grew up with that.
We have the opportunity to be like Elon. And what did Elon do? Elon looked and he found industries that were behind the times, that there was an opportunity to do a 10X. Right, to an order of magnitude improvement in what was going on in the industry, whether it was rockets or electric vehicles or tunneling. The brain thing is kind of, I don't even know if you can call that an order of magnitude. It's just radically different. So I feel like those of us who are successful, have the money, have the freedom, need to start looking around and say, what else could we revolutionize? And for me, I'm homing in on the idea that we could revolutionize housing. Could we make the cost of building housing less expensive? Could we make housing fundamentally more efficient? Could we use Tesla technologies? Could we build housing with solar built into the roof? Could we build and do it efficiently? It's not just we're stacking some features on a house. It's we've got to figure out, can we make a house in a day instead of 10 weeks? Right? Can we can we get the time it takes to build a house down from 10 weeks to 10 days? Can we make that kind of order of magnitude improvement? Can we reduce the cost of concrete? Can we find a way of making concrete more environmentally friendly? Can we, come up with other materials? I don't know. You've heard Elon talk about HVAC, right? HVAC for the home, using the heat pump. So did you ever see the Heineken commercial where the women go into they're showing off their new house and the women go in the closet and they're all cheering about how big the wife's closet is. And they hear this men screaming and they walk around the corner and the men are in the Heineken closet. He's got a refrigerated room for his Heineken, which is stupid. No one can drink that much Heineken, but it was funny. And I'm like, well, if you use the Tesla heat pump and the Octavalve, could you just say, we're not going to use a refrigerator more, we're going to have a refrigerated room? Maybe that's not crazy. And, and put the hot water heater on the same thing. And there's efficiencies for the hot water heater and the air conditioning and the heat and the refrigerator. They're all in the same heat pump system. Maybe there are efficiencies that can be gained there that can make the house more efficient. So I sort of have this path, and I'm not trying to say this is just about housing. I'm saying I want everybody who is in this position it doesn't really matter how much you have. Start thinking, what industries can we like? You and I talked about this briefly before we went live. I have a video called Beyond Impossible where they're revolutionizing the meat industry. They're finding ways of improving meat by an order of magnitude. What can we do now that we are freed? Some of us are freed from the burdens of the daily work and freed from fear about not being able to pay the mortgage. What can we do next? How can we build a team? Can we invest money? Can we find a way of revolutionizing something? So that's sort of like this big picture. Like we can't just sit back and let Elon fix everything. We have an obligation to follow in Elon's footsteps and work hard and innovate and take risks to build something else that will make the world a better. Because people accuse me of being an Elon fanboy. Hell yes. Yes, I'm an Elon fanboy. He is making the planet better for humanity. I'm a Jeff Bezos fanboy because he made the planet better for humanity. Elon is expanding humanity into space. He's expanding our consciousness with Neuralink. He's eliminating soul-crushing traffic. There's all these things he's doing. He's cleaning our air. So, of course, I'm an Elon fanboy. How could you not be an Elon fanboy is my question. But we shouldn't just be fans and sit back and let him do the hard stuff. We need to follow his example. I'm not saying you got to sleep on the factory floor, right? I think you probably should at some point sleep on the factory floor, but we've got to find. So I'll ask you this question. I already called on housing. Are there any industries that stand out in your mind that could have that kind of revolutionary change? Is there anything on your mind like that?
Yeah, I loved your concept of kind of the heat pump and an octavalve system to take the heat from a AC, and instead of throwing it out, use it to heat your water heater, or that kind of stuff. I think they will get to that. That might be on the roadmap for Tesla down the road.
Yeah.
But to your point about Elon, I mentioned the first mover advantage and second mover advantage. Every company from now on is a second mover. They have it easy. We should take a moment and really give a shout out to Tesla and Elon, because if it wasn't for Tesla and Elon, we wouldn't be talking about Lucid Motors or Rivian or anybody else. This was an impossible thing to go from gasoline. The most powerful interests in the world were oil companies. So, first and foremost, that was a huge thing that they accomplished. And it has really opened the doors to show you, they had a lot of FUD to fight. They had a huge uphill battle for a long time. But there's an optimism. One thing I've been thinking about with what happened in Texas, we have a lot of wildfires here in California. You guys have hurricanes. I saw a tweet. I forget the gentleman's name. I thought it was spot on, and I retweeted it immediately. He says, "New rule from now on: no one is allowed to make fun of preppers." And I really
I'm a prepper. That. I'm a prepper, right?
I figured you were. I'm not a prepper. I try to be prepared for stuff, but maybe not. I haven't thought of everything. I have a Powerwall. I have solar. So what's cool is if the power goes out, which it has, I'm not affected by that. Ben Sullins on his channel, he did this review of a product. He bought it with his own money and did a review, which was so cool. I forget the name of the company, but they're in Arizona, and it looks like a solar panel. You mount it on your roof, and what it does is it's not through evaporation or there's another process. It's like a kind of a delta pressure situation where they evaporate the water out. But you just put it on your roof, a little pipe comes out, and you get clean drinking water. It's taking the water out of the air. And
oh, cool.
Yeah, it's not much, right? It may be like a liter a day or something for this big panel that sits on your garage. But now if you have solar and you have some room left, what if you got two of these and you have them come down into a little, a 5-gallon jug that is generating pure, clean water out of the air? Now if the power goes out and systems are not restored or there's something crazy happens, you'd still be able to operate. And so I think a little more independence, you'll appreciate this. Self-reliance and independence, which are kind of foundational libertarian policies. I think we're at a place now where the technology can actually make that possible. You could plug out from the grid and say, you know what, utility company, screw you. I've had enough of your price hikes. I'm going my own. But we're not that far from having that possibility, a dream. So I want to see more battery storage as well. Right now, Tesla's leading the way on that too with the Powerwall, but we need more companies to be able to offer solutions like that. And with the battery shortages that we're hearing about, it might be tough. So generally, Earthship, more passive homes is another concept that I want to do a video on. You probably will too.
I've seen a little of it.
Yeah. There's a lot to be excited about though. There's, I think the general zeitgeist has opened up to understand that our Earth is finite, that the climate is changing, like things are happening, and we as people should try to be smart about how we do things, especially if you're not like compromising. My Tesla is the fastest car I've ever driven, and it happens to also cost less than a Prius to fill up and operate. So that's a great place to be when you're win-win. You're not compromising, which people don't want to compromise. I don't want to sit in an 80-degree house to save the planet. I want to be comfortable. But if I could be comfortable with solar and everything else, that's the win. So I think the key really will be to do what Tesla did and make whatever products you make them desirable and make them cool, not practical, because that doesn't really win over people the same way.
Yeah. So thank you, John, for supporting the channel and for you got your shout out. Jim Whitehead says, why is nobody other than Tesla building giant battery factories? Jim, CATL is building giant. I think CATL, LG Chem, and Panasonic are all, and we could probably at this point start doing a Q&A. If anybody has questions, please put them in the chat. I believe that CATL, Panasonic, and LG Chem are all in the process of building big factories. I think it's my view that Tesla is sharing its 4680 technology with its 3 suppliers, with the understanding that we will buy every battery you can make, and if we can't consume the batteries you make, you can sell them to other people. But as long as we can use every one you make, you sell them to us. But I do think that ultimately over time, you're going to see those 3 companies and maybe others produce huge volumes of batteries. So.
Yeah, well said. LG is planning a big factory in Indonesia, which is where a lot of the raw materials are going to be coming from.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, and so what's really nice is they're working with local governments to help in this, because this is going to result in jobs and opportunities. So the Indonesian government is all for it. They're going to probably prioritize it. LG is a big time player here. Samsung. There's some other South Korean companies as well, but there are a lot of companies doing this. This is going to be one of those.
Go ahead.
This is a big gold rush. You got to have battery supply. That's the name of the game.
So there was a question about what do we think about liquid metal batteries. So I'm going to take this, and if you have a comment on it. I see a lot of things about different battery technologies, whether it's solid state or liquid metal, or there's a lot of different ideas. And here's my take on this. The batteries that Tesla is currently producing and that CATL, LG Chem, and Panasonic are currently producing are already good enough for EVs to be better than internal combustion engine vehicles. And they are continuing to iterate and make improvements on those batteries. So you're going to see Tesla producing a 4680 cell with 400 watt hours per kilogram in about 4 years. And the CATL is probably going to be making 4680 iron. I'm not sure it's 4680. I think it's going to be 4680 iron phosphate cells that are going to be significantly better. And they're going to enable 300-mile range in the low-end Tesla vehicles, including the compact that's coming in 2023. So I think there's a challenge for any new battery technology, which is, and I think that the theory is that liquid metal or solid state could get to the point of higher energy density, higher than 400 watt hours per kilogram. The real challenge for any of these battery technologies is, can you produce it at scale, and can you produce it at low cost? Because what Tesla's doing at the 4680 is driving the cost of cells per kilowatt hour for the good batteries, for the high-end batteries, down to $60 a kilowatt hour, which is roughly half where it is now. And CATL's iron phosphate batteries, I think they're going to get down to $40 or $30 a kilowatt hour. So if you come out with an amazing liquid metal battery or an amazing solid state battery, but it's $200 a kilowatt hour, it's a very limited market that's going to use that. Do you have any thoughts on that, Ricky?
Yeah, that's a great point. People ask me all the time about QuantumScape and what I think about QuantumScape, who has potentially like kind of a prototype solid state battery. They have this kind of glass electrolyte. But the problem is, they're not going to have a product for 4 or 5 years. And to your point, where will Tesla and LG, all the other people making iterative improvements over our lithium-ion batteries of today, where will they be in 5 years versus this kind of more pie in the sky? I mean, if we got a solid-state battery, we would all be very happy with that. Like, we want that, right? But it's a really hard problem. It all comes down to just a quick TLDR. Interfaces. Whenever a metal or material passes over an interface, it's a very tough thing. You can't have like stark interfaces. So you have all this like interstitial kind of issues. Tough problem to solve. And if they do get it, to your point, Warren, they still have the problem. They're not manufacturing company. If they figure out the engineering tech of how to make a battery, that says nothing about are they going to be able to manufacture it. So I kind of think QuantumScape is going to get bought out, or it'll be a licensing play. Like they'll license their tech, whatever they've come up with, to the LGs and Teslas of the world who make the battery packs. And as far as you mentioned lithium iron phosphate and liquid batteries, there's going to be a whole slew of way more commercially viable, just environmental friendly, less energy dense home storage batteries. And that's another great place. We don't need Tesla car batteries in your house. There's no need for that energy density. Give me a big old barrel. I've got room. Give me a big barrel that can house a huge battery. It doesn't have to be energy dense at all. And so that's where lithium iron phosphate is a great example. Lithium iron phosphate actually has the added benefit of having 4,000 charge cycles before it really even degrades. We're talking like a 10 or 20 year battery you could just power your house with. Really cool stuff. So I want to see more innovations there as well. And that's kind of the breakdown. You ought to either have the latest and greatest cutting edge, where you have, car or airplane, eVTOL kind of applications, or the other end of the spectrum, forget energy density, optimize for cost, and drive that to a point where you could sell a 20 kilowatt hour battery pack to every home in America for $2,000. That is a winning formula. And that's when our grid cleans up. What a lot of people don't realize is adding more solar at this point, or wind or turbine, doesn't mean anything. The sun stops shining at night when you come home from work. The way we clean up our act is storage. Energy storage is the key.
Yeah, I agree. And then just real quick, it matters if the solid state batteries or the advanced battery technology goes significantly over 400 watt hours per kilogram, in that it enables electric VTOL. But I'll just say that really quickly. I want to address a couple questions that I saw. One question was, Warren, why are you shorting CCIV? I have no investment position in I hear this a lot. I have no investment position in CCIV or Lucid. I did consider buying what are called 2-year puts, which would be basically betting that the stock is going to fall. I did look at it. The deal wasn't that good. It wasn't a good bet, so I didn't do it. And also Tesla fell, and I ended up investing. I bought more Tesla stock because Tesla stock went down, and I bought on the dip. The other quick question that I wanted to address was, somebody asked, what about how long are Tesla's batteries going to last? What are they going to do with bad batteries? This is a particular fear that people have. If you have a structural pack and then a battery goes bad. So in any Tesla, as I understand it, it is possible that a battery will go bad, and Tesla's battery management software routes around a few or even several bad batteries. The battery, I believe the battery life is basically long enough that it will outlast the car or close enough. And, they're talking about a 1,000,000 mile battery. If you've got a vehicle with 400 miles of range and it has 2,500 cycles, which is not that hard to attain, then it's a 1,000,000 mile battery. If your vehicle lasts 1,000,000 miles and you're complaining about that, you got a problem. Iron phosphate cells, for those who don't know, iron phosphate cells have longer cycle life, and they have the advantage that they allow you to charge up to 100% without causing a problem with cycle life, where with the nickel-based cells, that's an issue. So I just want to address those two quickly. There was a question about lithium mining, and I think it had to do with the environmental consequences of lithium mining. My understanding is that Tesla is going to be extracting lithium from lithium clays, and that this will be a very environmentally friendly process. Do you have any thoughts on lithium mining, Ricky?
Yeah, there's a company I'm preparing some research for, a video on, that has a new process to kind of accelerate the process. The main way we get lithium now is in brine pools. Imagine just getting a bunch of ocean salt water. You throw it into a brine pool where there's a lot of surface area. The sun is baking it. The water evaporates out, and you're left with like lithium brine, and you can separate the salt and the NaCl from the lithium. So lithium is widely abundant. The problem is it's very scarcely abundant. Like there's no large densities of it. So there's a new, and that brine pool approach takes years for that to work via the sun. And there's some new like nanotech companies that are proposing solutions that they could make that process happen very quickly. And so now imagine, again, to your point about first principles thinking, we're in California where we are always in desert, drought situations. So imagine if we had like a desalination plant offshore, 5 or 10 miles off the coast of San Diego, where salt water is pumped in. We do this brine, separation to get lithium out of the salt water. We take the fresh water out of it. Then we take the salt and do something with that. And we just generally add freshwater supply, also doing lithium. So these are the kinds of radical new ways of approaching this problem, I think, are important. Tesla has some sort of a patent new approach to extracting it from the clay. Again, in Nevada, especially, I guess there's a lot of lithium in those brines. Anywhere where there used to be saltwater flats, like in Utah, you'll have huge lithium deposits as well. So they have some kind of a technology. They haven't talked about it very much. Have you heard much? But I figure maybe the next investor day or when they have more concrete data to talk about, I'm sure they'll have a slide deck on it, and I'm looking forward to it. But I'm not exactly sure what they're doing or what their approach might be, but might be a good topic for us to do future videos on.
Okay. And there was a question about the air suspension. Do we think that Tesla will extend the air suspension, or did they already extend the air suspension to the Model Y? I think there's a lot of different features that are coming on a lot of different Tesla vehicles, and it's really hard to say what's coming next. I actually think, and maybe I'm going to ask you about this. I'm going to posit something. One of the thing I'm probably most excited about for Tesla is the compact that they teased at Battery Day. They had this 2023 compact. It was under like a white tarp, and I think, based on the Sandy Munro interview, I think we're going to see, and Elon said something that sounded to me like they're going to have a whole next generation factory. Remember, it's about the machine that builds the machine. Hint, hint, there's t-shirts on my website, elonbits.com, where you can buy the t-shirt, The Machine That Builds the Machine. That and the Elon Be Less Wrong are my two best-selling shirts. But I think that we're going to see a radically new factory after Berlin and Texas. It might be, I should say, I think one of them will be in Austin, but I think we're going to see a radically new factory design for a radically new design vehicle. So I think the 2023 compact is going to be, the whole frame is cast in one piece. It's going to have a structural pack, which is not going to be new for that vehicle, but the whole frame being cast in one piece is something. It's going to have 48-volt wiring to replace the 12-volt wiring, and it's going to be done in such a way that robots will be able to install the wiring, which they currently can't do. Something about, I don't understand the manufacturing issue, but they so far have not been able to get the wiring down so that robots can do the wiring, which means they need more labor, which means it takes longer to make the vehicle. And I think there's going to be more. There will be other features to the 2023 compact that are going to be even more amazing, stuff that we didn't think of. Like, nobody saw structural pack coming. Elon was talking about cell to pack. He didn't talk about cell to structure. No one saw that coming. He was on Third Row Tesla podcast, and he talked about cell to pack, and it's okay, that makes sense. And I saw that CATL was working on a cell to pack solution with its batteries. Structural pack came out of nowhere. And I think and a lot of things at Battery Day came out of nowhere, right? There was more than structural pack. So I think the silicon anode was something that came out of nowhere as well. So there's going to be stuff coming on that 2023 compact that's going to make our heads spin. And it's going to make manufacturing more efficient. So the Fremont factory is around 500,000 or 600,000 vehicles a year. Shanghai is around 500,000 or 600,000 vehicles a year. Maybe they'll be able to push them to 750,000. I think Giga Texas and Giga Berlin are going to be more like 2 million vehicles a year each. But I think the next generation factory is going to be able to pump out like 4 million of these vehicles a year, or even 5 million of these vehicles a year, because they're going to have because the vehicle is going to be designed to be manufactured. It's going to be designed to be efficient. It's going to be designed to have low cost per mile. It's going to be designed in a lot of ways. It's going to be designed to be the ultimate robo-taxi. I think it's going to be designed so that you can have different versions of it. But do you have any thoughts about the 2023 compact and the manufacturing of it that stand out to you? Or have you gone into that kind of speculation?
Yeah, I think people have kind of likened the compact, whatever you want to call it. People don't like the Model 2. I don't think I do either. To the Robo-taxi car. I actually don't think that would be the perfect Robo-taxi car. I think what Tesla would do after this would be a perfect Robo-taxi car. Imagine, like where you could have higher occupancy, maybe a sliding door or more doors. That way you could have 2 or 3 people already inside and they have their own little private space. The car comes pick me up, my door opens, I get in, I have my own little private space, maybe a little TV or something. I can sit back and do my work. And when I get to where I'm going, I get out. I don't think we would use a car like we're used to for a robo-taxi. So I think the compact to me is how and they'll take their time with this because you have to have battery supply in hand before you can do this in any meaningful way. But I think the compact will be the car that is when everybody has a Tesla. Because even now on my channel, I'm sure yours as well, people will say, I love Tesla, it's all fine, but I can't afford one yet. So this will be the car that changes that, and it kind of will spell game over for the gas car. The only problem is going to be the battery supply. And again, to your point about, we were talking about with Lucid earlier, one thing that they have in favor is they're not trying to make 1 million cars. That's really hard. Talk to VW and Ford. It's really hard right now to make 1 million EVs because of battery supply. But what they're trying to do is make a more premium car, which is a much easier place to live in this world. So I think the compact is going to be separate from, I think, I've been hearing rumors of like a Tesla van. They're going to have you seen that Zoox, which is that startup that was bought by Amazon? That car where you forget the steering wheel. I mean, we already have a yoke. We don't have any dials anymore in the Model 3. Elon's headed in a direction of like, forget the car as you know it, rethink it. So I think the Robo-taxi car will come after the compact, and that will be perfect for the Robo-taxi network. I don't think it'll be the next one.
So you actually hit me on something that I love to talk about. So I actually think the perfect Robo-taxi is more than one type of Robo-taxi. And for me, the most important Robo-taxi is one that people really, I've made a video about this. I think one video about this that I like, people aren't on board with me on this. The perfect Robo-taxi is a single passenger Robo-taxi. Elon talked about that 80% of Uber rides are single passenger. If you're on the road today, most cars you see have one person in them. So what if you built and I think there's room for the one you're talking about too. I want to be clear. The one that you're talking about is I think the perfect Robo-taxi fleet has different options for different people. So Cybertruck is great for some things, and Semi is great for some things, and the Model Y might be good for some things. But the most important Robo-taxi of the future is a vehicle that's half the width and half the length of a modern car. It's designed to seat one person and be incredibly efficient. So we talked before about like 4.5 miles per watt hour, right? Well, what if it was 10 miles per watt hour? What if you were able to build a vehicle that only had a 10 kilowatt hour pack and still got 200 miles of range? And then you could build 5 times as many as you can vehicles with 50 kilowatt hour packs. So I think I call it the pod car single passenger Robo-taxi. I think that's the most important Robo-taxi for average human travel, because most of the time we travel alone. And then you would have the Tesla minibus, which I think is the next vehicle after the compact, which may be able to seat 20 people in the US and 30 people there are poorer countries where if you can get the cost per passenger mile down lower, it starts to make transportation better. If you think about, and I don't know where your family history is from. I talked to people from India. I've talked to people from Egypt. There are poor countries in the world where if you delivered a Robo-taxi, like the pod car Robo-taxi I'm talking about, it only costs 5 cents a mile for the rides. They still couldn't afford the ride. But if you could get the cost per passenger mile down below a penny, and it's 2 cents a mile for a ride or a penny a mile for a ride, then this is one of those things that I was on Meet Kevin day before yesterday, and we were talking, and I think a lot of people who are like us, who are relatively wealthy, and we can afford to buy a Tesla Performance Model 3, or we can afford to live in a big house, we have a very different perspective and will make things affordable. And it's hard for us to recognize how hard life is for 4 or 5 billion people on this planet, right? I mean, maybe it's even 6 billion people on this planet, that if you can drive that cost down, then you can take not only do you reduce pollution because they're riding around in diesel buses, but you're also just making their lives better. You're delivering lower cost, more convenient transportation to billions of people. So I think I'm very passionate about this question of the perfect Robo-taxi. And it's really about the perfect Robo-taxi fleet and the freeing us from the burden. This is one of those things that a lot of people think I'm crazy when I say this. What if it freed us from the burden of car ownership? We don't think of car ownership as a burden. We think it's awesome. I couldn't live without owning a car. But we don't think about, like we talked earlier, about having to go get an oil change, having to get you're always going to have to replace tires, having to get the windshield wipers replaced. What if, where am I parking my car? I got to get car insurance. What if we were freed from all that and you just hit a button on your phone and there was a car waiting for you outside and it dropped you off at the front door and it picks you up at the front door, and you never have to worry about any of the maintenance and you never have to worry about filling the tank or charging it. It just takes care of all of it for itself and you just get the ride. I think and what about sleeper Robo-taxis that take you from city to city? There's so much potential for I'm like an evangelist for the Robo-taxi world. I think the Robo-taxi world is going to be amazing. So I rambled for a while there. Do you have any thoughts about my perfect Robo-taxi fleet?
I'm totally with you. The pod you're describing kind of sounds like Aptera. Are you familiar with that company?
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
in that size ballpark, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, what they've done is kind of what Elio Motors did before that, but they basically reduced the rolling resistance and the drag coefficient by about 3x. So they're able to go 3 times as far. So 4.5, they're doing like 12 miles per kilowatt hour. So that's kind of what you'd have to try to get to, like a really small frontal area, very low, just general frontal area height, and a good drag profile. So that's probably how they could do something like that. But actually, I think you're right about that. But I think you can have a similar feel with what I'm describing. Imagine if you had a pod environment. Imagine a car like the Model X, but like a limo version or something. It's just like a couple more doors that can seat 6 people, let's say, for example. But you're in a pod with like privacy glass, and if you're driving with your wife or your significant other, you can put the glass down so you guys can see each other. But if you don't know the person, you put the window up, and you're in a pod. You open the door and you get in, and for all intents and purposes, you're alone. You're driving by yourself. You get your destination, you open the door and you get out. That'll lower a lot of. I mean, a bigger car means you can have more batteries, you can run more laps between charges and stuff. But you can get a similar thing to what you're describing, which is the dream of independent travel, right? Who would want to get in a subway ever again? And I think COVID has probably showed us maybe subways aren't the future that we think they are. I think maybe a more private, personal, low cost per mile transportation solution might be the way to go. There was a
Go ahead.
There was a question in the comment section I wanted to address. So again, I think I love what Tesla's done, but I don't think Tesla is perfect. One of their stances that I do not like is they don't support vehicle to grid. And if you think about it from a business perspective, here's why. You're degraded the battery, not putting miles on it, which means the company has to honor your battery pack early, right? So that's not good for business. And you don't buy a Powerwall then. I have a Powerwall, which I wouldn't have needed. My car is sitting there doing nothing. It could be powering my house right now instead of my Powerwall. But the problem from the business perspective is, so Lucid Motors, I think Rivian, a lot of the new upstarts, they're going to offer vehicle to grid. In the case of Lucid Motors, they call it vehicle to everything. They could charge another car with it. All the voltage converting and inverting is all done and possible. So in the end, in the interest of the environment, if you're going to make a battery pack, my car is not even the biggest out there, but a 75 kilowatt hour battery pack that 90% of the time is doing nothing, that's just inexcusable. There's no reason why we shouldn't have that. And why I want to see competition is I have 3 gripes with Tesla, and I've made this pretty publicly clear, I think. One is like right to repair. They have a very Apple-like position, which I do not like. I just had an M1 MacBook die on me, and I wanted to strangle Apple for it. It made me so infuriated. I lost all my data because they make this whole slab of a logic board with everything on it, and if any little thing happens, you're toast. So Tesla's cars are increasingly becoming unrepairable. They're like discardable items. Like if you have an accident, throw it away and get another one, kind of a thing, which is not good for the environment. The second thing is the full self-driving. They keep jacking up prices on it, which really irritates me. I'm actually holding out and not getting full self-driving because, well, first of all, you're paying for something for the future, you don't have it yet, and they keep jacking up prices. And to be honest, the third thing is vehicle to grid. And the only way Tesla will change any of those philosophies is with competition. So if everybody else is doing vehicle to grid and Tesla's not, and they're losing sales as a result of it, then you're a libertarian, you get it. The free market has to speak, and without any other voices, Tesla can do whatever they want. They can charge $30,000 tomorrow for FSD, and people probably will still buy it. But they are going to a subscription model, and that might be another topic. You and I should get together and chat again. I have a lot of I've seen your projections, by the way. I think we should do this again and talk about FSD and how it factors into some of your cost projections for Tesla shares. That might be a fun one as well.
I was laughing because I've made 2 videos about why V2G will never happen. And I'll give you the short answer, the short version. I think vehicle to home would be a different story. I think vehicle to home could make sense.
Well, that's what V2G is. I mean, when they say grid, it's your home.
No. Vehicle to grid is balancing the grid. That when the grid needs electricity, you feed V to H and V to G are 2 different things.
You plug into your circuit breaker, so you can control it to only discharge your power for your house. That's what the Powerwall does.
Right. But no,
my Powerwall is not just discharging to the grid. It'd be the same thing. I'm just saying,
I'm just saying I agree with you that V to H would make sense. Vehicle to your home would make sense, maybe. But vehicle to grid does not make sense because a lot of people are passionate about vehicle to grid, that somehow you're going to make extra money by having your car plugged into the grid and serving the grid when it needs electricity. And somehow this is going to make you more money. And the problem with vehicle to grid, vehicle to house, fine. I understand that could make sense. Vehicle to grid, here's the problem. think about your vehicle's battery as having a cycle life, and let's say
Yeah.
it has 2,000 cycles. Okay, and let's say it's gonna and let's say a cycle is 400 miles. So currently, we consider a 400 miles a mile is worth about 50 cents. So a 400 mile cycle is worth about $200. The amount of money you're going to get by feeding that money that back into the grid is far less than $200. It's probably like $2. The value of the cycle of the battery cycle in use in a vehicle is 100 times the value of the cycle serving the grid. And I think that's probably also true generally with the house. The advantage with the house, and the thing is, your battery isn't home while the solar cells are feeding the charge in. Your car would have to be there for your. If I understand, like let's say there's a power outage, it would be great to have your
Imagine
vehicle
if you live in
serving
Texas,
the house,
right?
Right. No, that makes perfect sense. But the idea that your vehicle is going to be sitting in your garage 24/7 to absorb the power from the sun and then feed the power back into your house when the sun's not shining. The problem is, well, you want to drive the car. If you want a battery that's going to do that, then why put wheels on it? Why put an HVAC system on the battery? All the things that go into a car, you don't want to waste that sitting in your garage. And especially if it becomes a robo-taxi, if you believe in the robo-taxi network, that car should be on the road 16, 18 hours a day instead of sitting in your garage backing up your house. That's the big problem with that. But
yeah, I mean, really, it's for emergency preparedness. You have a big battery that could be charging your house. Also, if you have time of use, you're in Florida where electricity is very affordable. That's not the case in California. We pay really ridiculous levels. And 4 to 9 p.m., which is our peak time in the summertime, is stupid. Here in San Diego, we pay 50 cents, which is absurd, right?
50 cents per kilowatt hour?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but so add 50 cents per kilowatt hour up over a 50 kilowatt hour pack, and you've got $25.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, the value of that 50 kilowatt hours in vehicle driving. Wait, did you say 50 cents a kilowatt hour?
Yeah. Well, I'll make it a little bit easier too. The one thing I remember about kilowatt.
That is competitive.
Yeah, exactly. That's why all the energy. Somebody in the comment mentioned AutoBidder, which is Tesla software for doing this.
No, wait, sorry, no, it's not, because if your 50 kilowatt hour pack has 300 miles of range, that's worth $150. If your vehicle, if you figure a typical vehicle is worth about 60 cents a mile or 70 cents a mile, which is the current IRS reimbursement rate, then a 50 kilowatt hour pack, if it gets you 300 miles of range, is worth $150 versus $25 on your 50 cents a kilowatt hour on the grid. So it's still, you don't want to waste the cycle on.
Yeah. So there's one more wrinkle, which is the cycle life degradation is incredibly complicated. It is not linear. So if your car was sitting there half charge and you were pulling in a couple of kilowatts and discharging a couple of kilowatts, you might be able to do that in perpetuity. Your battery might never degrade.
If it's around the 50% charge, I agree with you.
So in my house, like my peak time of use, I might use, or let's say 5 or 6 kilowatts. If I was just dealing with that kind of a small pool, and again, to your point, my car is my car. I don't want to degrade the battery sitting here. But if the power went out or there was an emergency, imagine every Tesla owner being able to power their house and not being able to. And like, as a consumer, give me the opportunity or the choice. And maybe Tesla could have a little thing that says, a little pop-up says, if you charge your house with this, we're going to have what's called a battery mile, which is not a driven mile, a battery mile, and we'll take this off of your warranty. There's ways we can get around this, right? It just comes down to, we don't have to keep talking about this, but.
So let me ask you a question, though. There was a question that I saw, it was a while ago, but there was a question about whether 900 volt systems, a 900 volt architecture is dangerous in some way. And I'm not aware of any claim that having 900 volt architecture on a vehicle, the Porsche Taycan has 800 volt. I'm not aware of any theory why that would be any more dangerous than a 400 volt. I think there's actually less current, right? Aren't the current lower and it might actually be safer?
No, it is.
Do you know more about that? You might know more about that than I do. So I'm asking.
Yeah, it is dangerous. So, like human skin, if you were to touch leads, a battery, our skin is not a very good conductor. So the amount of current that we could draw is limited, right? So the higher the voltage, that's what's going to kill you. If you were to touch like a 1 volt battery that has like the potential to have thousands of amps, your body just can't transfer that kind of current. So one volt won't do anything for you. But 900 volt, if you were to touch the same thing, even at a low current, which is all your body can transfer, would be enough to do some real harm.
But we're not going to touch we're not going to be touching the wiring.
Exactly.
Is it a fire risk?
No,
it's not a fire risk.
It's not a fire risk or anything else. It's just you need those big orange cables, and it needs to be clear, like, don't touch any of this stuff. And these batteries are all super smart. When you plug in your supercharger, you're not going to hurt yourself. Nothing happens for a while. There's a huge handshake, and the system is going through and figuring out what kind of wire even it has, and it detects all of that. So it goes through an entire process before it charges. So the systems are pretty safe, yeah.
Okay, so there was a question before about AutoBidder, and I don't know enough about AutoBidder, and I don't know if you have any thoughts on
Yeah.
AutoBidder and what value it brings to Tesla. How does Tesla make money on AutoBidder? Do you have any? I don't know the answer to this question. I've been wondering for a while. Do you have any thoughts on that?
What's funny is Tesla seems to be the company that has every ace in their pocket, but the Robo-taxi network would be top priority. If you can have your car driving around and making you money, that's the winner. If you don't have that, AutoBidder would be my car sitting here doing nothing, and instead, at midnight to 6 a.m., where here in San Diego, I paid 9 cents, it would charge up. And then during peak times when the grid says, hey, it's a bidding system, meaning my utility doesn't make electricity. They're just the middlemen. They're the brokers, right? So if this nuclear power plant says, hey, yeah, we can sell you electricity for 18 cents, and then suddenly everybody needs electricity, peaker power plants get kicked on, and that bidding goes up, and it's like, holy smokes, 5 o'clock, it's a hot San Diego day, everyone's running their air conditioning. Now we'll buy it at 48 cents. Tesla goes, sure, we'll do that. And then my Model 3 is providing that power. They keep track of all this, and they'd keep a commission, and they'd give me the rest of that money. So imagine my car would not be doing this when it's not lucrative. But during peak times, when a peaker power plant would have to be turned on, these are the dirtiest forms of electricity. This is like your natural gas historically, or coal. Instead of having to kick those on, every electric vehicle out there could go, okay, I've been sitting here doing nothing, but right now at 5:42, for the next hour, we project a shortage of electricity. All these EVs could provide the power, and the grid would be stabilized. No peaker power plants turn on. Tesla deals this auto bidder system. Like, imagine the stock market. Bids and buy and sell contracts for kilowatt hours of electricity. And as a result, they'd make a commission and give you the rest of it. So they could make money doing nothing but sitting here with your car plugged into the grid. It's cool stuff. And whenever you have time of use, it could really, it could save you some money.
And even without V2G, the cars could decide, okay, we're not going to charge now when there's a peak load demand.
Yeah.
We'll just turn off charging, and that will help reduce the peak load demand. And same thing with Powerwall. Powerwall could say, we're going to stop sucking charge out of the grid if it's sucking charge out of the grid. What was this question? I don't know if you want to address this. I have my own opinions about this. There was a question about for India's, there's a lot of talk about a gigafactory in India, and India being the second or first largest country in the world in terms of population, although a weak economy by comparison to China. Do we think there's a lot of talk about Tesla doing something in India? And there's a question, the question was, is it going to be energy or is it going to be cars? And I'll just say my opinion. I've looked at the Indian car market. I've looked at the Indian income or wealth distribution. And while it's a incredibly huge population, the percentage of the population that can afford a Tesla is very, very small. The number I saw was something like 10 million households have more than $30,000 a year in household income, which is not enough to afford a Tesla. So really, you're talking about maybe 5 million people. And then we were talking before about the next generation factory. If the next generation factory is going to produce 5 million vehicles a year, a population of 10 million people who can afford the car won't be buying a car every 2 years. So there isn't enough domestic demand in India to afford a Tesla vehicle. Thank you, Sugar Shane, for your support. So do you have any? But I think there's a lot of potential for Tesla energy in India, but I don't know enough about the Indian energy market to say that. I know they're big on solar. They're doing a lot of big solar projects. Do you have any thoughts on what a gigafactory in India might do? Would they make cars? Would they make solar and grid storage? What do you think about that?
Yeah, good question. Also, thank you to John with the super chat earlier. We didn't get a chance to address that, but thank you guys for supporting Warren and the show. So you mentioned, you kind of alluded to it, but my family is from India. We came here when I was about 5 years old, and a lot has changed from the last 30 years when I left, and in the last 30 years. The main thing though is there's generally kind of a grid instability issue. There's regions of India that have like routine power outages where you could have like no power from 5 to 7 p.m. and people have like a rolling system. And this is kind of a normal thing. In bigger cities, like where my dad's family is from, it's very modern, very much like here in the U.S. kind of. But it's a wild west in terms of like availability. Forget like having money. You couldn't reliably charge it. If you watch Long Way Up, there's regions of South America where you plug in like a 150 kilowatt hour battery pack EV, you're going to just bring the entire grid down. There's just not,
Yeah.
there's just such little of it, and
Yeah.
people use so little of it.
Costa Rica has a lot of power outages, just as an example. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So
Very similar. So I think solar, Tesla's not going to be making solar panels. It's such a commodity. It'd be a 0-point business to do that. They're not going to do that. Solar roof, not going to really, people aren't going to be able to afford that probably. So
Right.
I think cars. And I think what they'll do is they'll build the Model 2 or the compact. And if you can get to cost parity, plus bring in, you have talent. Indians are known for like exporting engineers.
loads of engineering talent.
I think our best import is probably engineers. So you have talent, and if you can build infrastructure, that helps kind of stabilize, increases the cost of, increases the wages people have, and kind of builds up communities. Matt Farrell and I have this show called Vice Versa, and we talk about like Africa, which will be another really key area. Currently, there's kind of a lack of infrastructure, but if you're going to be building factories and stuff, like the factory that we mentioned, LG in Indonesia, these decisions can be really critical to bringing in the next round of customers. To your point about Lucid and Tesla, they're not competitors. Lucid is trying to get a customer from Mercedes. And if we want more of this, we need to have more customers too. If Tesla's going to be a $100 trillion company, we need more customers. And the way you make customers is have factories in places like Africa and Southeast Asia, and bring the general world's kind of standard of living up and the wages of the world up. Because when you do that, China, it wasn't long ago, China wasn't really a market for smartphones, but now China is the market for everything. And all this manufacturing we've been outsourcing to them has built a nice little middle class, which was kind of what we were known for in the 50s, probably.
Yeah. Do you think that, see, my numbers, I don't think India has enough domestic demand for the volume of vehicles the next generation gigafactory is going to produce. Do you think I'm wrong about that?
It's probably going to be, I don't think it's going to be just a local play in terms of like selling them all in India. It would be selling to Southeast Asia, which is a big market. There's tons of people in Singapore,
Yeah.
Really wealthy people
and the Middle East,
in the region,
and the Middle
East, right? But the rules are different. Like India and China are such powerhouses, and they're so powerful that they can India and China require you to have factories in the country if you want to sell there. Like, the government is very powerful in those countries. So that might be the way to get in, and you have a labor force and everything else. But I think that car is going to get exported to the region.
But like the leading cars in India are like the Suzuki Maruti, these really, really small cars that are probably around $10,000 or less. And that's just the challenges. I agree there's some potential to export, but of course the China gigafactory is going to export. Here's what I see. I see that this next generation factory, one in China, one in probably Austin, and one in Europe. And, collectively at that point, Tesla will be producing between those three super factories and the current, the factories they have or are building now, it's going to be about 20 million vehicles a year just on those factories. And I don't know if world demand is enough to support vehicle factories in other places. But I think you agree with me, there is a really potential for grid storage in India.
Yeah.
That those devices, especially on maybe not like an individual family can afford a power wall, but maybe
a mega pack.
Well, I think some small bit, at some level businesses, and yes, mega pack in particular at the utility level, mega pack could be really a big deal, especially if you build it in India. Maybe you can build it at lower cost than building it in Nevada, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's a luxury here in a way, but that could be critical to bringing stability to the electrical grid in places like that. Yeah.
Okay. So there's a question that was asked two different ways that I want to address, and maybe ask you how you address it. First, it was 20 million. Now it's 50 million. Can the grid handle 20 million EVs charging Teslas, or 20 million EVs charging at once, or 50? Now it's 50 million. Can the grid handle 50 million EVs charging at once? So I think the answer to that is, well, they won't all be charging at once. I think that probably what's going to happen is most vehicles are going to charge at night. And what people don't realize is grid demand is low at night. The peak demand on the grid is probably between 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock. It depends on, the weather and places that have hot. But, let's say in the South, the heat is in the summer. is that the heat is middle of the day. So the air conditioning demand is probably the biggest driver of electricity demand, and that's middle of the day. That's not at night. The most areas cool off at night, and the air conditioning is using less power. So people don't realize that the energy, the grid, the biggest problem with electricity isn't having enough capacity. It's the peak load problem. That when demand is at its peak, you need it. That's when peaker plants kick in. You just don't have enough. So if you can spread charging out over time overnight, if it's even a problem to charge overnight because there's so much less electricity demand at night, I think that's actually going to solve most of that problem. And then you're going to have all this new solar on all these roofs that's going to add a lot more capacity. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. Is there any challenge for the grid serving all these vehicles?
It's a great question. I get this question all the time. First of all, my EV is 300 miles of range, and I charge every third day, maybe. So first and foremost, I'm talking about charging twice a week. So that could be the first number to update in your models in terms of like the demand here. The second
What was the number?
What was that?
What was the number? How many? What are you charging?
I charge every third day.
Okay.
Typically.
Oh, and Ray Johnson, thank you for your support. We'll get to your question in a minute.
Great. And so that's the first part of it. The second thing, like you mentioned, is all about that base load. So nuclear power plants can't be turned off. The nuclear reaction happens. It's going to run for about 20 years. You got to maintain it a little bit, but that just is on. That's a base load plant. The question really is about uncertainties and spikes in that demand. So yeah, if you have EVs in the future, I think what we would have is, you have to be UL listed to plug in an appliance into the grid. I think in the future, EVs would have a similar thing where the grid would be able to tell EVs to lower the charge rate or do some other things,
right.
And that's the answer. It's a smart grid. It's a kind of a decentralized grid of, in a world of Powerwalls and V2G, auto bidder, it'd be a decentralized generation grid even. I'm a power plant. I have, 5 kilowatts of solar coming out at peak times of the day. And so the demand on the load of the grid is unique and interesting to figure out. The key really is to keep everything under a baseline. So if everyone has an EV and we need more generation, that's not a hard problem to solve either. Add another power plant. But as long as it's predictable and not just swinging wildly at certain times, that's what the grid can't handle. And the more I read about the grid...
If everybody plugs their car in at 7 o'clock in the evening when they get home from work and they all start charging right away and they don't recognize, wait, this is a peak demand time. We'll wait to charge the car until midnight. If they do the latter, then the problem is solved.
Exactly. And for me, I mentioned midnight to 6 a.m. I charge my car in that window and that window only because the difference in price is potentially 5x, right? So my car is programmed. I plug it in, but it does nothing until midnight. Easy problem to solve, I think.
Let's turn to Ray's question. Ray, thank you again for your support. Ray asks, do you think Western Australia can support a gigafactory due to the amount of battery storage Australia wants and the 16,000 plus Cybertruck pre-orders? So I think just like I was talking about India not having sufficient demand to justify a vehicle gigafactory in India, even though there's a huge population, there's not enough people that I think can afford a Tesla vehicle in India. And I think Ricky might disagree with me about that. Western Australia or Australia in general, Australia is smaller than California in population. I don't think Australia, even though Australia is not poor, Australia doesn't have the population to support a vehicle factory. Now, does Australia a good place to build a battery storage factory? Australia might be great for that because of all the nickel, which I think India also has a good nickel supply. As far as the Cybertruck pre-orders, there's no way Australia has sufficient demand. A Cybertruck gigafactory is going to produce 250,000 to 500,000 vehicles a year. And Australia is not going to be able to absorb that level of supply. And I don't think the demand for Cybertruck outside of Australia is going to be that big in Southeast Asia or India or even China. I think the demand, so I think the Cybertrucks that go to Australia will probably come from here, and they will unfortunately cost more because of the shipping and taxes and everything. Do you have any thoughts on Western Australia for Gigafactory?
I think you said it spot on the head. Even though it's a huge continent, the population density is pretty low. I think Australia would be a key export for the Cybertruck Austin factory. I think they'll be shipping them out because Cybertruck's really going to sell in North America, U.S., Mexico, Canada, Australia. There's only a handful of countries that the Cybertruck is going to be big, and I think Australia is going to be a big importer of Cybertrucks, but I don't see a factory yet.
All right. Okay, so I think we are we're pushing my limits of the ability of endurance. So I'm going to say we're going to need to wrap up soon, and we're not going to take any more questions. So I just wanted to ask Ricky if there's anything. I'm done. I don't have anything more to say. I'm tired. I want to thank everyone. But Ricky, is there anything more you'd want to say just to close out?
Yeah, first and foremost, for one final round of calls for hitting that like button and subscribe to Warren's channel if you haven't already. He's got a unique insight, and I think I would love to be back on your show or have you on mine. So maybe as the months unwind and news breaks and stuff, I think we should keep on top of this and update our viewers and stuff. And clearly, you've held an audience of I think 800, almost 1,000 people at one point. So thank you guys for watching. And again, I'm Ricky with Tuba Da Vinci. If you guys aren't familiar with my channel, I have a link down there. We'll put it in the description. And if you're from my channel watching Warren, make sure to hit subscribe on his channel as well.
Yeah, and please, I thank you, Ricky, so much for coming on. I would love to come on your channel next time. I really appreciate it. I want to thank the moderators, Jim Whitehead, and I don't know if Mark was here tonight. I didn't notice. The moderators helped moderate the chat for me. And of course, please support the channel on Patreon. Click the like button, subscribe. And check out elonbits.com for the t-shirts. And with that, I'm going to end the stream. And Ricky and I will we'll talk briefly after we're done. But thanks. And I'll keep an eye on the chat for the next 5 minutes. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Wow. Thank you for